So hello everyone. Hi Neeraj. Hi Jonah. Hi Pak Suriyan. Pleasure seeing all of you here. Uh, Neeraj, am I audible? Just a
Yes,
mic
yes.
check. Cool.
Yeah, loud and clear.
So welcome everyone to this agriculture roundtable. Today we are having a very interesting topic, which is policy and investments. Those who have been part of the previous three roundtables, we covered some very critical topics, including irrigation, digital agriculture, as well as input management. Now, all of these three things are very interlinked to the topic of today, which is policy and investment. Without a conducive policy environment, you will never be able to achieve what the three previous topics were able to achieve. And at the same time, we have to understand that investments in agriculture is very critical. And we are having today a little bit deviation from our previous roundtables. We have identified 5 jewels from across the globe, and we are just going to be sitting and hearing the depth of knowledge and insight they're having. We are having people with decades of experience in formulating policies, in ensuring that investments are put in the countries which are developing in nature. And that makes it very critical for us to listen to these people and learn from them. And without taking much of time, because I know we are having some of the best speaker possible, and I would like to take this honor of introducing Joanna Kane-Potaka. Joanna is the Assistant Director General of External Relationships at ICRISAT, a path-making institution which is redefining how the agriculture is being there for decades. She began her career as an agriculture economist and later moved into market research in the agribusiness area. Since then, she has worked in a wide variety of other marketing-related areas, including strategic marketing, communications, fundraising, knowledge management, and uptake of scientific research. Currently, she also leads the global smart food movement, which has been selected in 2017 by USAID and Australian government as one of the winning top 10 global food innovations. The smart food or the superfood are the most critical aspect going forward, because the way we are doing agriculture today, we cannot continue doing that because we are having severe strain on the resources we have. And I am a big, I'll say that proponent or someone who strongly believe that smart food or the superfoods, which are high in nutrition and doesn't need too much of inputs to produce, is the way forward. Over to you, Joanna. Please share your insightful presentation with all of us.
Thank you so much, Deepak, and thanks to HnyB for this Agriculture Roundtable and your whole series. So I'll just share my screen. Let's see if this works. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk today about a game changer, and it's about diversifying staples. We have to look at what can make big impact. There's a lot we have to work on, but we have to look at what are some big changes which are really going to make a difference. And I'll go through the needs, the opportunities, and the policies. So first of all, the needs. So if I could just give a little bit of history here, how back in the 50s and 60s, where the big focus was just on food security, and it was about having enough food to eat. And then later there became the recognition about nutrition security. So we looked at the hidden hunger and how we can't just have enough food to eat, it's the quality of the food as well and the nutrient content. And then more recently, the UN started talking about sustainable diets, diets that are sustainable on the environment. So what we said is we need to bring all that together and we need to go a step further. So that next focus really is, how can we not work in silos? How can we provide solutions that are good for you, so the nutrition, good for the planet, so the environmental sustainability, and good for the farmer? If we don't bring the farmer into any food system solution, we're going to be missing a big part. And that's about the farmers, their resilience, their ability to cope with climate change, and their engagement in that whole value chain. So it's like a triple bottom line, which a lot of companies follow, but it's especially designed around the food system. So any solution really should be good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer. But what we found is, and this is what we call smart food, anything that also has those three criteria. But what we found is the biggest hurdle for smart food being in our diets and in our food system is what we call the food system divide. Just like you can have a digital divide or an education divide. So what we've had here is for decades, we've had the vast majority of investment in the big three, the wheat, maize, and rice. So whether it be policy support, private industry investment, product development, even the development aid, the vast majority go into the big three, wheat, maize, and rice. So when you invest in something, it does really well. Value chains are developed, consumers become aware, it becomes popular products, and it attracts more investment. And so does even better, and so the cycle continues. So it becomes very difficult for anything else to break in and be part of that. So a few statistics here. So wheat, maize, and rice, the big three deliver about 50% of all calories consumed worldwide. 45% of private sector agricultural investment, research investment, goes into just one crop. So this is globally, and that's maize. So that's a huge amount of investment into just one crop. If you look at how things have been changing over the last 50 years in relation to contribution of calories to our diets, the foods that have increased the most are oils, wheat, and rice. The foods that have decreased the most are sorghum, cassava, and millets. I'm showing an example from India here. If it goes from 1960 up to today. So if you look at production there, so rice production has tripled in that time. Wheat production has increased 800%. Now maize, the yellow line there, is starting to take off, and that's increased 500%. And you see there some of the traditional staples like millets and sorghum that are pretty stable, while others have had significant growth. And that's a very dramatic difference. So huge change in what's happening in our agricultural system, which reflects also what's happening in our diet. Now, you could say, does this matter? Well, really, the two biggest, arguably the two biggest challenges humanity is up against now globally is climate change and health and nutrition. Now, if you look at the graph there, you can see climate change is negatively impacting on our cereals yield. So this is the expected reduction in yield. So massive decreases are expected, especially there in rice and wheat, because they're hardier, especially when we're talking about higher temperatures. And health and nutrition, we have a dichotomy of we have malnutrition, but we also have rising diabetes, we have rising obesity and other health issues that relate to that. These are potentially the biggest challenges we have globally. And if we do not change the food system, it's going to have major continuing negative impacts. So we do urgently need solutions that cope with climate change, cope with the water shortages, the soil degradation, the malnutrition, and these diet-based health issues. We need more diversity on farm to help with this. We need more climate smart, resilient agriculture to be able to cope with this. We need more diversity in our diets, and we need healthier diets. So what we saw is what could be a game changer here that really can have big impact. And we saw that we need to focus on diversifying the staples. We need policy support, we need investment to make this a reality. So how can we go from the big three to the big five, the big seven, and so on? Now, diversifying the staples, because staples are typically, across Asia and Africa, staples are typically 70% of the plate. So if we are not focusing on that, then we're focusing on 30% or less of either the agriculture or the diets. So really, we have to focus on that 70% of the plate if we want to have big impact, and big impact on nutrition, big impact on coping with climate change. But if we were to diversify the staples, then it's not diversify it with just anything. We have to diversify it with smart foods, foods that in unison are good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer. Now, what we saw is we need a new approach to do this, because this is a major undertaking. I mean, we're talking, if you're from an area where white refined rice is the majority of what you're eating, or majority of what's on most people's plates, then that's very hard to think we're going to change that. But it wasn't always there. Diets have changed. So there is a chance to do it, but it's not going to be done easily and without a different approach. So what we saw is, to achieve this, first of all, you have to have a focus on just a few smart foods at any one point in time. There's a big movement globally about increasing biodiversity in the agricultural system. Now, this is critical and needed. However, to diversify the staples, we can't be working with 50 or 100 different traditional or diversified or underutilized crops. We've got to focus on one or two, because to be a staple, you have to have well-developed value chains. You have to be a global commodity. So even if we're trying to think how to be part of a better food system for the marginalized farmers across Africa or Asia, you still have to think globally to get the solution and then act locally. So we need to develop major global value chains if something is to be a staple. Now, we need to also drive that from the consumer side, because you have to have the demand there. And to do that, you've also got to work with this whole value chain. You've got to then link back to the farmer, and you've got to think rural, urban, and global. Now, then we looked at, well, what first should we focus on to bring back as a staple and to diversify those staples and really develop major value chains? Now, sorghum and millets were selected as the ones to focus on, and sorghum is often considered a millet. They're often categorized in the same group. Now, there's many different millets and grown around the world. India has the largest variety of different types of millets of any country in the world. So let's look at the opportunities that are here with millets and sorghum. If you just look at the nutrition and health benefits, so we just brought out last week the largest study ever on looking at the impacts of millets on diabetes. And it showed very strongly that it can reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So very, very important, given that diabetes is increasing in every region of the world and increasing dramatically. A lot of the millets are very, very high in iron and zinc. The top 3 micronutrient deficiencies globally are iron and zinc. And in India, the anemia, which is typically because of a deficiency in iron, is increasing. Even with all the efforts that the government and NGOs and others have been putting in, the anemia is increasing. And if you look at finger millet, it's got 3 times the amount of calcium as milk. Huge. And we've looked at the bioavailability, and it's good, which means the amount of that iron you can absorb, the calcium that you can absorb. Very, very important for growth, for children, for helping with malnutrition, and very, very important for women as well, and everybody. We're about to bring out a new study week after next. It will be released, and it's looking at the impacts of millets on cholesterol. So a sneak preview now. What it shows very strongly is that it reduces the bad cholesterols and increases the good cholesterols. and so has a positive impact on cardiovascular diseases and issues. So hugely important, and also can help reduce obesity. So huge study results that are coming out soon on areas that are huge health issues and needs globally. Also, the millets have high fiber, high in antioxidants, gluten-free, and very good levels of protein. Now, if you look environmentally, they can survive with minimal fertilizers and pesticides. They have a low carbon footprint, so good as a mitigation effect to climate change. They survive with minimal water. They survive in high temperatures, so they're considered climate smart and will be much more resilient and helpful for farmers in coping with climate change. Because they've had less investment, there's a bigger potential to increase the yield, whereas many of the other large staples have had a lot of investment and are closer to a yield plateau. And of course, there's multiple uses. They're used for feed and fodder, they're used in brewing, they're used as a biofuel, and of course, they're human food. Now, the time is right now as well for millets and sorghum. So the climate change priorities are huge, and these are climate smart crops. The SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, have a big focus on climate change, but also nutrition and rural poverty, and these can be solutions to tackle that. There already are urban health food trends that are the aspirational trends that are showing an attention to the millets and also to these ancient grains, and so there is already an increase. It's taking off. There's still a nostalgia around a lot of the millets as well. Plus, they happen to fit some of the biggest Western health food trends. They're a superfood, they're an ancient grain, they're gluten-free, and they're good for losing weight. And in March this year, the UN General Assembly in New York unanimously approved 2023 as the International Year of Millets. So we believe this will be the turning point for global attention to millets. So this is the time to invest. This is the time for the support to be ready to fully capitalize on that. There's already been, in the last, say, 6 or so years, quite an explosion of new millet products coming on the market. India especially is leading the way with the largest variety of millet products, but it's happening in other countries too. And I'll just give a few examples here so you can see that there are products there, but at the moment, there's still niche products, niche markets. So it's how do we grow these? So for example, in Malaysia, where they mix millet and other grains with rice. So you can cook a multi-grain rice. You can cook millets, some of the small millets, small millets just like rice. That's with turmeric there. Here in Australia, where you get pre-cooked, again, millets and rice and other grains all together, you get extruded snacks, you get milkshake drinks, you get breakfast cereals. Here you've got a rice and millet pasta. Here in Germany, you've got baby porridge, you've got juice, pear, apple, and millet juice. In France, you've got another quinoa and millet pre-cooked meal. Of course, it's a flour, so it can be a pancake mix or any other bakery item or other breakfast cereals. Here in Hungary, you've got millet balls, so an extruded snack product. In Nigeria, the Milo drink is made with sorghum. Then in Malaysia, some more products there with millet milk. This is in West Africa, when Nestlé has replaced wheat and using pearl millet in their Cerelac, the baby weaning food. Here in the UK, there's sorghum snacks. In Australia, instead of using wheat, there's a gluten-free wheat mix that's made with sorghum and other snack products. Of course, India, there's a lot, so I can only show a couple, but here's a dosa mix, millet pancake mix, smoothie, crispies, of course there's flour, you can pop it, and so on. And there's a whole variety of foods that you can make with millets. This is Seshu from Big Basket, and he was saying how there's been a significant increase of people on their site searching for millets. So they get 75,000 searches from consumers using millets as a keyword in every month. And then people searching for super grains every month, they get 160,000 searches for that. And he said this has been rising. So if we look at policies to support this, so first of all, really critical, we need a level playing field. Now, if I use India as an example here, where there's the minimum support price and the public distribution system, now that has favored the rice and wheat. And millets cannot compete. So, for example, even a farmer growing millet may sell their millet and instead buy the rice, because they may be able to sell their millet for 30 or 40 rupees a kilo, and yet then they can buy the rice through the public distribution system at 2 rupees a kilo. So they may not even eat their own produce. You know, and we have to have a level playing field. So any policies that exist to support agriculture needs to equally bring in and support the millets. However, I would go a step further, and I would say we not only should have a level playing field, we actually should have policies that incentivize for smart foods. We should have policies that incentivize for more nutritious foods, for more climate smart foods, foods that are going to be more environmentally friendly. So whether it be through the government schemes, so for example, the Anganwadi schemes or the midday meal school feeding schemes, we should be bringing in more of these smart foods like the millets. We should be supporting more biofortified varieties. So that's just about conventional breeding, where we select not just by yield, but also by the nutrition level, or selecting varieties being aware of the nutrition level. Very rarely, the nutrition level of varieties are known. And it's not, and so we need to find a way. So for example, the government through their midday meal school feeding schemes could say, right, we're going to introduce millets, but we're going to use this particular variety, which has a higher nutrient value, so that they create that demand for higher nutrient, more nutritious grains. Because the nutrient level can vary significantly by the variety. So for example, you can triple the amount of iron in, say, pearl millet just by which variety you select. So very, very important that one government decision can triple the iron that the children are receiving. Campaigns. The government needs to run campaigns to support and create a buzz and make it interesting around these foods. Now, of course, the government of India is starting campaigns because of leading up to the International Year of Millets, but we're yet to see what happens, but more countries need to do that. And we could look at policies that support labelling and product guidelines that show the more nutritious foods, that show the varieties that have the higher nutrition levels, and show that where it's more supportive or more climate smart. Also critical is support for micro and small and medium enterprises. Typically, those entrepreneurs are the ones that are the pioneers, that bring in new foods, that create modern products, that change the image of these products. They do the hard groundwork. So they need to be supported more, because even though there may be incubators, once they start, it's still very, very hard to continue to survive and go to scale. So the government policies need to support micro and small and medium enterprises where they're engaging with smart foods, where it's fulfilling those values that are most important. However, the government still need to engage with large companies, because large companies also can take things to scale, but doing it in a way where it's got that triple bottom line, good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer. So how can those large companies be supported through policies, but only if they fulfill that triple bottom line? So that was the end there of an approach that we believe is a game changer. The movement has already started globally, but it will only succeed with policy support and with investment and having that drive and recognizing if we do not diversify staples, we will not have the big impact that's needed to cope with climate change and that's needed to cope with the nutrition and health issues that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. It was a really very insightful presentation. And in fact, audience would have learned a lot that how important millets are. It's just not about typically like, the food security, but today we are also talking about the density of nutrients in the food we eat, because that is also very critical. And with seeing the alarming rise in the demand of food over at least next 30-35 years, and the challenges and the restraints of using the resources, we'll need to find alternative ways, and you are showing that path. I'm having a very simple question, because based on your own experiences of being someone who has been understanding the marketing very well, we have seen that this example of quinoa. Quinoa from 2008 to 2014, the prices tripled, right? From just Peru, it has started going from Peru to Kenya, to India, even to Australia, more than 75 countries growing it. Now, suddenly then you have people start losing that interest and the prices crash. This creates a lot of challenge for the farmers, because the farming understanding and the knowledge which they create, right? It goes through generation. So how do you counter these problems going forward, where suddenly, definitely next, because of the promotion and marketing, more and more people would be interested in using millets and eating millets, right? There is a global, I'll say that force who's trying to push in that direction. After 6-7 years, when that dies down, something new comes in, you are having a poor farmer who started growing millet, but he ends up again in the same situation which he was when he started growing corn 2 generations back or 2 decades back. How do we solve this biggest challenge of agriculture, according to you?
Okay, this is a very good example to bring up the quinoa, because 2013 was the UN International Year of Quinoa, and that was the turning point for global awareness about quinoa, and that's when the markets took off. However, quinoa became very much a niche market, very high end, and really to the very high urban, sort of high health conscious market. What we're trying to do is not pitch millets in that space. We need it to reach the mass market. We need it to be a staple. So you still have to create a great image around it and create a buzz around it, but not for it to be only a high-end niche market. Now, the urban markets at the moment that are growing for millets, which are those niche markets, they're still very important because they become the aspirational markets. They help change the image of millets to something more positive and modern. But we mustn't stop there. It's about getting millets into mainstream. So the objective is different. It's also, millets are a little easier. If you eat some of the small millets, like the foxtail millet or little millet or crosso millet, you can cook it just like rice. Now, I would never sit down and eat a bowl of quinoa. It's not really tasty that way. Whereas millet has a lot more flexibility in that regard. So you're right in what you're pointing out, but our aim must be to take something to the broader market. And that will help then, because then the millets have to be accessible and affordable and a larger scale. That's the intent, but there will be many challenges along the way.
No, I understand there would definitely be a lot of challenges, and we'll have to see. We are already seeing climate change as one of the biggest challenges to solve, right? And other challenges, I believe, are too small, right, to get worried about. We have to work in a direction where we can reduce I'll say that the withdrawal of water in agriculture, and millets are beautiful crop to grow with like, in extreme climate as well. That brings me to a second question. Like, I understand that we need to have a mass level movement because you are trying to shift the habit of people, and easier said than done. We all know that shifting people's at least food preferences is always be a little bit of a challenge. What would be your recommendation to those governments? I'm not saying predominantly India. There are a lot of part of the world where you see there is a challenging environment. For example, whether you talk about Middle East and North Africa, where these products can be grown, but still the adoption of those products are not there. What would be your 3-line or 4-line recommendation government? They should get on their hands immediately to ensure that, like, they are becoming food sustainable or food secure themselves within the confine of their own countries if they move on your direction.
Yeah. So the millets are definitely a savior for many farmers in many countries, especially the dry zones. And over 60% of agriculture is in the dry zones. It's huge. So these actually are a critical option that's needed for those farmers, but not without driving the consumer demand, the consumer awareness, and getting entrepreneurs involved in creating those products. And that needs to be customized per country and customized to the local culture, etc. So we have to balance the demand and production and drive that consumer side, get people excited. And with 2023 coming up for the International Year of Millet, that is the time now for governments to invest, support the right industries to then drive the demand, and that will then support the production.
Do you also see that the international trade practices, including like, the subsidies being given on some of these 3 key crops, where it makes it very, very difficult for small and marginal farmers, whether from Latin America or Africa, to grow these millet and compete with imported flour all the way from Germany or from Australia, which is so cheap that actually, like, it's very difficult for them to match the prices. Do you see even that needs to change going forward?
Yes, so you have to look at what sort of level playing field is there and what are the incentives or disincentives. And what you find is that farmers will grow, say, the wheat, maize or rice in an agroecology that they're not suited to, and they will fail every second year. We have areas where we work where they fail 3 out of 4 years, yet the farmers still keep planting them because that's what they know, and that's what the value chain is set up for. The seed system's set up. They know they can sell the grain because the value chain is set up. They know pretty much the price they get. So the governments have to step in because this is a radical change in the middle. It potentially is much more viable industry. It's going to be more adaptable to the climate change situation, and it's going to be more nutritious. But to get through that change period is difficult. And really, we do need governments to come in and support that and look and understand in each country what are the incentives and disincentives.
Perfect. Now, coming towards, like, other part of the equation, the consumers. Do you see that actually, like, we need to involve more food technologists and nutritionists to start creating more, I'll say that, better tasting millet dishes, right? So that there is adoption, because we all know that corn was not that great unless you had the cornflakes, right? And once you have the cornflakes, like, everybody wanted that on their table. Do you see that even on the side of creating that level of demand from food nutritionists as well as food technologists is also required?
Absolutely. And the challenge becomes also keeping something tasty and healthy. What we mustn't do is go down the route that, say, rice and wheat went down, where it becomes refined and you lose the nutrition. I mean, really, white refined rice is just empty carbohydrates. High glycemic index, a huge impact towards what's happening with diabetes. Very, very dangerous. So how do we ensure the millets also don't go down that same track? And that's where the food processors, the food technologists, the nutritionists have to play a key role, so that as the industry develops, we're developing it still in the right direction.
And now I would move a little bit away from millets, because we had a very great discussion on that. How do you see the possibility and prospect of some of the native typical crops like turmeric, ginger, garlic, which also have very high nutritional density, but unfortunately they are only eaten by either Southeast Asians or typically in Middle East. But they have pretty decent when it comes to the nutrient as well as other active ingredients, which are very healthy, especially, for example, turmeric. Curcumin has been proven to be a very good immunity booster. But again, we see that only in nutraceuticals you find them outside of Asia. How do you see the promotion of these native crops as well?
So what we see is there's two approaches that are very complementary and both necessary. One is this diversifying the staples, just selecting one or two to focus on to bring in a big way. Complementing that is how you build agrobiodiversity broadly, bringing in local foods, bringing back some of the traditional foods, popularizing them. And so you're diversifying both the diet and what farmers are growing, and saving that agrobiodiversity, which we're losing, and means that we're not going to be able to cope as much with changes in climate. So what you say is really, really important. And we need both approaches because they complement.
And now that's bringing me to my last question. We have seen that there is a shift towards protein, right? Especially when the push toward the plant-based protein or plant-based meat and all those new innovation. I read a report, and believe me, it was very alarming for me to see that actually in next 10 or 12 years, they are saying that from 3% of the demand in the overall food basket market, it is going to go to 10%, the plant-based protein. How do you see that? Is it going to cut into more native varieties, or the big three would be suffering?
So it's a positive movement. The danger is the ultra processing. So these are often positioned in the health food sort of category as well. I mean, they're promoted because they say they're more environmentally sustainable, but they're also considered a health food. However, many of them are ultra processed. The processing that they go through to extract the protein and to create it to look and taste like a meat has a lot of petrochemicals used in the process, a lot of additives, preservatives, the heat treatment. I mean, it's unbelievable if you read the process. You almost couldn't call it food at the end. So we have to be very, very careful. It's what I call nutrition washing. So there's a term called greenwashing, when something is presented like it's environmentally good, but it actually really isn't. So it's greenwashing. So this is like nutrition washing. However, plant-based protein is still very good. It will help environmentally. It's just you've got to look at the detail of the product, how it's been processed, and it's not ultra processed.
Now, there I believe that the traceability is going to play a very important role, where you can see what process your food has gone through. Because just by saying something is healthy, doesn't mean it is healthy. In fact, even I believe there is a need to change how we put the nutrition on the boxes, right? Wheat means X amount of calories. Believe me, wheat grown in 3 different farms will have totally different calories structure, right? But we have the standardization, and I think that needs to change. And this is where the world would be a better place when it comes to food and ensuring the climate is taken care of. Thanks, Joanna. It was a real pleasure interacting with you, and thanks a lot for a very insightful presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure my audience would have also learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepak.
So now let's move to our next super speaker. So we are having Mr. Suriyan Vichitlekarn. I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Suriyan is the executive director at Mekong Institute. He steers the strategic planning and implementation of the intergovernmental organization's human resource development, capacity strengthening, and research effort to spur the acceleration of sustainable socio-economic development and poverty alleviation in the greater Mekong sub-region. Mr. Suriyan carries and extensive international development experience, having assumed key positions, including those at GIZ, the Food and Agriculture Organization Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, Asian Development Bank, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that's ASEAN Secretariat in Indonesia, and the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center. Mr. Suriyan is also a good friend, and floor to you, Park.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Deepak. Can I share my screen?
Please, sir, please.
Right. Okay. Can I check if the screen read properly?
Yes, sir. Yes, it reads properly, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Pak Deepak, my old friend, colleague, and partner for several years. First, I would like to extend my thanks to HnyB for extending invitation for me and the Mekong Institute to share our perspective and experience in this Roundtable series. The Roundtable series and the 7 topics that you have planned are in fact very pertinent, timely, particularly this year we are discussing about post-COVID-19 recovery and the preparation for the UN Food System Summit, which is planned to be held in this September. So having said that, allow me just to give a quick information about Mekong Institute. So it has already briefly been mentioned by Mr. Deepak. Mekong Institute is an intergovernmental organization founded by the 6 countries located in the Greater Mekong sub-region. These are Cambodia, People's Republic of China, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. Mekong Institute is mandated to promote capacity development for regional cooperation and integration, of which agriculture and food have been the foundation agenda of GMS and Mekong Institute. Now, in this presentation, I would like to share my perspective and experience on 2 important topics. And this will be drawn from the work that I have been doing in Southeast Asia and particularly from Greater Mekong sub-region. First will be on policy aspect, and the other will be on investment as the topic of this roundtable. Both are distinctive but mutually reinforcing. Allow me just to first touch upon on the first aspect. I wish to emphasize the importance to see agriculture and food in a broader perspective. I think many years that people like us have been working on the agriculture development find it difficult to address issues and challenges because partly it is seen only a mere sector. In fact, agriculture engages all people from farm to fork, as well as stakeholders along the value chain. It involves multiple resource use. Thus, agriculture requires a whole society approach. And as a result, it is important entry point to see how agriculture will not only address the sustainable development goals number 2 or number 1, poverty alleviation, but it's an entry point for all sustainable development goals. Having said that, this year we are discussing a lot about the emerging concept of food systems. This is in preparation of the UN Food System Summit, as earlier mentioned. The food systems, including the 5 action tracks, and for this particular event, I will not dwell into the detail of the food system and action tracks, but would like just to give a perspective referring to food systems that it helped to offer us a new perspective in looking at how agriculture sector could be seen beyond a mere sector to a broader and holistic fashion. Along this line, policy development would need to recognize this trend and foster co-benefits of various aspects of sustainable development of agriculture, and also seek to promote cooperation among all stakeholders. This will ensure that the stakeholder will understand and appreciate the importance of food systems. As a result, this will lead to clear incentive and also facilitating long-term adoption and development. When talking about the policy, one should also recognize the need to also include policy enablers and the actual implementation. For this particular event, I would like just to give emphasis not on the policy development formulation itself, but the importance to look into policy enablers. The following I wish to highlight as important to ensure that policy which is formulated will be facilitated into the actual implementation that create impact on the ground. First and foremost, I would like to emphasize the importance of having public-private people partnership platform and processes. We all recognize the importance of stakeholder engagement in policy development and implementation, but oftentimes there is lack of platform and there is lack of continued process that recognize the non-public sector stakeholders. Having such platform and processes will ensure that we have all stakeholders will have mutual understanding, promote ownership and willingness to embark into the policy implementation. Second aspect I would like to touch upon is farmers group organization. Since I was still in college, we discussed about farmers group organization and empowerment, but this should not be seen as a mere farmer grouping. So as for the government to work with the farmers, not individual basis, but also in a group. But we should see farmer organization as an effective economic operational units, because smallholder farmers, small and medium enterprises, if they work individually, they will find it difficult to really provide a good best agricultural practice linked to market and engage in value chain. But if they are supported and developed into an effective economic operational units, this is where farmers group can act in a more proactive manner and therefore will help smallholder farmers to access to value chain and market. Next is on the physical infrastructure policy. Governments need to recognize the potential benefit beyond the physical infrastructure. To ensure access and benefit given to farmers, policy support should also be given to digital literacy and digital infrastructure. This will also foster greater opportunities for the rural agricultural services. We have seen this pick up quickly during the period of COVID-19 pandemic situation. And I believe that if we were to really accelerate the development, support the smallholder farmers in order to adopt best practices, access to agricultural services and digital tools and platform, this digital investment or infrastructure policy would need to be put in place. Next is on access to market, which has been one of the bottleneck issue for smallholder farmers, micro, small, and medium enterprises. During the COVID-19, we see how e-commerce has been evolving, and we should capture such opportunity to promote wider implementation and support MSMEs in using e-commerce as an important market channel, so that this could diversify the market channel so that they can really gain benefit of getting the result benefit chain from the value chain and market. Next point that I would like just to touch upon is that several issues and challenges faced by agriculture and food systems are in fact transboundary and regional in nature. Existing regional cooperation frameworks and platform, and I'm speaking, for example, like in the case of Greater Mekong sub-region, will not only provide support in sharing of knowledge and experience, but also help to identify the issue and challenges that require a better understanding of transboundary in nature, regional in nature, and therefore help to promote joint approaches and actions so that we can tackle them in a more constructive and progressive manner. Allow me also to touch upon other policy enabler aspects where it is important that we need to take together with policy development and implementation. That would be on the focus that in the future there will be difficulties to be experienced by farmers and issues of livelihoods of the farmers themselves, particularly the smallholder farmers. This is particularly true in Southeast Asia, Greater Mekong sub-region, because they are majority of farmers. The issue of access to arable land, the issue of multiple water resource use, water scarcity. This will be very fundamentals of the food systems, and this need to be addressed. And this issue require a long-term policy. And therefore, I would like to emphasize that these topics should not be given limited attention, and therefore I would like to call for greater attention in addressing these important aspects. Next is food system policy and implementation. We need to think beyond the project logics. Oftentimes when we promote policy and we develop agriculture, we always think about the project logics, and this oftentimes has very short time span success, but it cannot be follow up and scale up in a more longer term. So what has been lacking is, in fact, the viable and scalable business model. In addition, value chain development would need to be inclusive, where farmers and value chain actors share responsibility and profit. This oftentimes we tend to really promote more on the products, which is becoming the target commodities and export-oriented kind of policy. We hope to be able to see how the value chain can be more inclusive and benefit and responsibility are shared, particularly with farmers and also other stakeholders. Next, in recognizing the aging farmers, and I'm sure that this is not only happening in Southeast Asia, Greater Mekong sub-region, but also across the globe, agricultural services throughout the value chain will be gaining very important role. And in fact, it has been already a growing sector. This will ensure that services could attract and engage youth and new generation in agriculture-related business. As we are experiencing the COVID-19 policy, we need to recognize the immediate need to support post-COVID-19 recovery in agriculture, particularly support needed to be given to farmers and MSMEs. Last but not the least, we need to ensure that in the course of policy formulation and policy implementation, we should couple with the capacity development process. This is to ensure that stakeholders be equipped with necessary knowledge and skill so as to ensure the implementation of intervention and also the actual implementation of measures. Colleagues in the audience, next, let me continue on the second topic on investment. Here, I would like to touch upon both public and private investments, as well as rural agriculture finance. Although I know that the last topic, there will be a separate series talking about agricultural finance, but I think it's in a way interconnected with investment. On the public investments, government should be clear on the focus on physical infrastructure. And beside infrastructure itself, software part that would allow the optimum utilization of such infrastructure is also important. This oftentimes has not been given due consideration, and therefore, when government invests in infrastructure, they need to also couple with how infrastructure will be operationalized and put into effective use. Next topic is on public investment in digital literacy and infrastructure. I personally find that this has not been given enough attention. This is urgently needed if farmers and MSMEs will be able to tap on digitalization potentials. Farmers Group organization as an effective economic operation unit needs public investment on this area so that they can be better connected to agricultural services, be integrated into value chain and access to quality markets. Considering the frequency of and unpredictability of extreme climate events and disaster, public investment is also needed in disaster and climate financing. This also including agricultural insurance. I would love to talk more about this climate financing, but since there is a separate event working on this agricultural finance, perhaps I would not dwell into the detail. Next is on private investment. Inclusive value chain, traceability, and agricultural services. These are where private investment will be needed because they have knowledge, they have resources, and they are best to invest into what works. With the growing recognition and demand from both industry and consumer, development and adoption of environment, social governance standards, and best practices in agriculture is also emerging. And I believe this could be an area where private sector could start looking into investing and to see how this could evolve into future practice. Last but not the least, on private investment, I wish to stress on the importance of rural and agricultural credits and finance. And of course, we need to adopt what we call finance value chain approach. Farmers and MSMEs do not only need to access to finance, but they need support along the whole finance value chain. This includes understanding the agriculture as a business, having viable business models, facilitating access to credits and finance, business advisory support, and ability for payback, and so on and so forth. So this rural and agricultural finance value chain will be very important in moving towards sustainable development in agriculture and also food system development. I also wish to highlight the growing interest on green finance, and there's been already initiative done in many countries around the world. In Southeast Asia also we have seen this growing a lot. Also to see how this green finance will support sustainable agriculture and food system in the future. I hope this green finance will be an area where we can look into shaping sustainable agriculture and also food system while also promoting greater investment in the region and also around the globe. Colleagues in the audience, I think I have covered some time. I would like to perhaps spend a few more minutes just to emphasize on key concluding message I would like to convey to all of you. So I wish to re-emphasize the following points from what I have earlier said. One is that agriculture should not be seen as a mere sector, but a food systems that relate the whole society. And this is why we need to engage various sector and various stakeholders to see how we can work based on our comparative advantage and the role in promoting food systems and to make sure that food system is functional. Next, agriculture is an important entry point for addressing and achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And therefore, agriculture is not only meant for food security, it's not meant only supporting poverty alleviation, but it can help strengthen the achievement of the overall Sustainable Development Goals. Why policy is important, as earlier said, but equally important are the policy enablers and the actual implementation Oftentimes, the issue challenges are not in the actual policy formulation, but in the actual implementation of the policy. So policy implementation issues we need to be looked into and ensure that there is a way to address the actual implementation. Last but not the least, investment are critical and needed in shaping future development of agriculture and food systems. It should foster sustainable agriculture and maintain food system functionality. So with that, audience, colleagues, I would like to thank HnyB for kind invitation to join the Roundtable series and share my perspective and experience. And I would be ready to entertain any clarification and comments you may have. Back to you, Pat.
Thank you, Pak. Sorry. It was a real pleasure of getting all the nectar out of your decades of experience in working across Southeast Asia. Pak, the first question would be around you have been doing a lot of work around creating intergovernmental organization and creating those collaboration, right? Working in whether in your previous role or even in current role, where all the way from Vietnam to Thailand, it's not easy. I would like to understand a little bit from you how the government or governmental agencies can collaborate better to ensure that actually we come with a comprehensive policies, because I always believe that there are a lot of regional value which can be shared across the borders, which is unfortunately is not happening that much. While we see in ASEAN, it does happen to a certain extent, but when we go out of these blocks, suddenly India interacting to the level where our Ganga is as good as Mekong, right? Only difference is that actually it is flowing in multiple states in India, while Mekong is flowing to multiple countries. But there is a lot of value in understanding, right, how Thailand has ensured their farmers are more sustainable, profitable, right, in Mekong Delta or in Vietnam when it compared to the Delta of Ganges, right? So I would like to understand from you that what governments can do more or how they can collaborate better.
Yes, thank you for the question. First, I think we need to understand.
A small request. Can you stop sharing your screen so that actually we can see you?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
All right. Thank you. Sorry. Yes.
No, you look so handsome. I don't want to miss you on the full screen.
Come on. Okay. Well, I would like just to make separate into a few points here to respond to your questions. First is that the general purpose of regional cooperation, and particularly in agriculture, has been broadly defined into two main areas. One is that regional cooperation provide a platform where countries can share knowledge and experience, how they address issues, how they develop policy, and what are best practices, success factors. This will continue to play an important role. And this is how we can shortcut learning curve of individual country by learning from each other. This will continue to be important for many countries in Southeast Asia and also across the sub-region, across region, and this including Mekong Ganga. The other aspects of regional cooperation is to really use it as a platform to identify what are transboundary and regional issues. These oftentimes are not really seen clearly from individual countries, because for example, if you look into cross-border value chain, if you look into transboundary pests and diseases, this oftentimes as a platform that we discuss some sort of common interest and knowledge, and they are not really trying to use to identify what are issue challenges and how we can develop collective joint actions. I find that this hasn't yet been used to the potential that regional cooperation offer. This may be due to the fact that promoting regional cooperation in agriculture also requires certain capacity and experience. And oftentimes countries' representatives also change over time, and there's no continuity. Country maintain the cooperation, but representatives change over time. So this is why organization like Mekong Institute comes in as a facilitator, moderator, and using platforms such as Roundtable to provide a platform that we can bring in this perspective, and therefore share, so that we can help to strengthen the regional cooperation so that they can advance the policy commitment and also collaborative initiative. So I think this is still the work that can be improved, but I hope countries will utilize more of this regional cooperation platform and framework, so expedite the policy and also to see how we can address transboundary and regional issues. Back to you, Pak.
No, sure. We are having already in audience a lot of policymakers and those also representing the government organization. I would request them to reach out and to Mekong Institute. They have been doing a very fabulous work. And I believe there is a lot of learning, especially when we talk about a crop which we all love, that is rice. A lot of work has gone, a lot of research, a lot of value addition has been done in Mekong Delta when it comes to growing rice in a sustainable manner. And I believe, like, we can learn a lot, especially on that aspect. Pak, my second question would be around, as you have also mentioned, like, the implementation policies has been a challenge, right? And that is common in India, as it is common in Africa, as it is common in Southeast Asia. What would be your, I'll say that, recommendations, right, to ensure that, like, it is bottleneck of implementation can be sorted out?
Yeah, thank you, Pa. In fact, this has been also the issue I experienced throughout my career. Because when we discuss about policy, oftentimes we tend to really focus on policy formulation. Yeah, that's why in my presentation, I mentioned the other two aspects that need to be built into policy processes. One is about policy enablers, because policy enablers will help us to see how policy could be seen in translating into implementation, and what needs to be coupled with the policy so as to ensure that policy is valid and it can be put into actions. The other issue is, in fact, not about the policy itself. Oftentimes, many issues we experience is about the actual implementation, so-called implementation issues. This ranges from what kind of the model of implementation, capacity of stakeholder, policymaker themselves in pushing, facilitating policy into implementation, engaging stakeholders, because oftentimes policy is set by a small group of people, but it needs to be implemented by a wider stakeholder. So I would think my emphasis will need to incorporate the policy enabler and implementation. And I think the more we understand the implementation aspect, this could help refine a better policy, because this will have tendency to be put into actual implementation. Back to you, Pa.
There is a follow-up question on that. Do you think that actually, like, engagement with the farmers is not happening to the level where actually they should have more say in the policy making?
Yeah. Engaging farmers into policy has been discussed for a number of years. Yeah. Because how we're talking about farmers in policy document, but there's no farmer in the policy consultation processes and things like that. But at the same time, I also recognize the complexity of engaging farmers. And that's why in all cases, we would like to engage farmers organization, association, so that we have their collective representation and engage. And we also hope that farmer organization and association will act as a bridge of creating understanding to the farmer themselves, because of course, farmer would not be able to engage in the process themselves, but rather through this association and farmers group. This is something I would hope that could be seen more in the future. Back to you, Pak.
Thanks a lot, Pak Suriyan. It was a pleasure having you, and very insightful presentation. And we loved the very important pertinent points you bring on the table and address them. I look forward to have more engagement between India and Mekong Institute, so that all of us can have value from experience your institution and your personally you have. Thanks a lot, Pak.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
So now let's move to our next speaker. And we are having a very dynamic person who would be our next super speaker. So V.N. Saroja ji, she is a Chief Strategy Advisor at the Indian Agribusiness Systems. She has in past consulted to organizations in a wide range of sectors, established and grown India's largest career website, the Naukri.com, dipped her toes in the entertainment industry, albeit through the technology route, and now truly is back to the roots, helping Indian agriculture sector. Floor is yours, Saroja ji, and we look forward to very insightful interaction with you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. It's a pleasure to join you all. But I must admit that my area of working right now is more agri-commodities than community farming that you have asked me to speak on. But since we are also in the process of working with FPOs and understanding how things happen, I've kind of put together what I've learned from working with the government as well as the other side. But you're free to stop me wherever you think that it's not meeting what you are expecting here, right? So when it comes to community farming, globally as well as in India, it has been sort of, split into two parts, so to speak. One is the romantic rich guy who's made his money going back to the roots and saying, okay, this is the kind of places that I would like to work with. These are what I can probably, he does his own research and, gets into the business of agriculture by bringing in everything he can learn from everybody else, right? That is one part. The other part is the part where you go to the landless and the marginal farmers and try and augment their incomes by helping them get into certain areas where they were unable to, by either a government or an external body helping them get into that business, understand, to set it up from scratch and therefore augment your incomes. Now, I would say that both these experiments are still in the experimental stage and require a lot more understanding of how all this fits into the market dynamics. Because anything that does not fit into the market dynamics will not sustain itself at a point when these external forces which are keeping them going go away, right? So when you start talking about what are the policies, what are the investment requirements, the first thing I personally believe is that you have to acknowledge that all this works today because there are external forces which are keeping them playing. And for this to move to become an indigenous, self-sufficient, self-motivated, and completely sustainable business, it will require a completely different dynamics where the entire market accepts that these are the kind of, new systems that are evolving, and this is how we will work with it. Now, personally, in the last few days that I have been looking at this whole thing for you, I have not found anything with a project that's been beyond 5-7 years, right? I may be wrong. I may not have found the right one, but whether in the other parts of the globe or in India, it's still a new nascent idea, and therefore I'm kind of putting in all the pluses and minuses that could work out here, right? And therefore, this external hand that is right now keeping it going has to already start figuring out how to transfer all the knowledge, all the networks, all the linkage, and provide those people with the appropriate, again, ability, skills, and everything that's required to be able to take on the market the moment these people walk away. And that's the single largest problem that any small farmer in the world has, which is the ability to handle those traders, ability to raise working capital, ability to save enough to tide over a bad phase. And those things are very important when it comes to being able to convert this into a regular long-term policy, right? And therefore, I think fitting into market dynamics and the funding part has to come from the project itself. But in the policy measure that I think something like the FPO structure or policies which kind of give them, whether it's the barren lands which come from the, society itself, or whether it's been taken on a lease or whatever, those pieces of land that they have to be registered somewhere and enable those farmers to be able to access organized funding. That's the second biggest problem that happens, which is that they may have these leases, which may be in the name of an NGO, they may be in the name of, Sarpanch, whatever it is. It has to reach the level of that group of farmers who are part of this experiment, who have been successful in growing something new, who have been successful in doing something, so that they can then generate their own funds, invest their surpluses, ask for more working capital beyond that, and then grow. And this is one policy measure which I think we are still, at least in India, struggling very, very desperately, which is how to get the least land, the lessee farmer and the landless who are working, or the marginal farmers. How do you kind of get them the kind of financing that they need at the rates that they need? You don't want them to slide back into going to the 35% per annum kind of a business at all, right? We are trying very hard, and this is something that we need to figure out. The other important thing I think around these kind of initiatives is skilling the farmer on financial literacy, on agricultural practices, best practices, and everything that he requires, again, so that he, before the external agency moves away, that he knows how to handle all this. A very, very big part of how the farmer, even a traditional farmer with large pieces of land, finds it very difficult to time his harvest and arrival in the market to be able to take advantage of better prices. It is not unknown even now, entire world, for especially in perishables, for the markets to be flooded together by all the farmers, because there is no way that they can space themselves out and be able to take the best advantage of the prices, or also the storage facilities or whatever other facilities exist. So that timing, that ability to understand how the market is moving, the ability to scan markets to understand how to get the best rates, the ability to bring in economies of scale, all this needs a lot of training, a lot of skilling, which I personally feel that we can do way more, especially in these small markets, whether it's Africa, whether it's Latin or Asia, different parts of Asia. So that's the other part that I wanted to talk about. And last one that I personally looked at was, how do we figure out a way to decrease underemployment in all these sectors? It is like a really vicious cycle that the landless and the marginal farmers are stuck in. They don't have surplus funds. They don't have ability to raise funds. Therefore, they are not able to educate their kids. The opportunities for their kids to get jobs which are outside the land is again very low. And therefore, they are stuck to the small piece of land. And, again and again, they're trying to do the same. It's a vicious cycle that just doesn't let them go, irrespective of whether we can augment their, the incomes through some of these initiatives. So that breaking that cycle, I think, does require a serious policy initiative, which gets where every district assesses the level of underemployment, the level of, the extra hands that are there on the farm, and figure out how to move them out and how to ensure that farming itself becomes much more profitable than it is today. And labor is a big part of this, especially for the marginal farmer. It is also an issue for the big farmer, where he says he doesn't get enough enough hands or at the rate that he wants. But at the same time, their level, the marginal farmers are also facing a problem because they don't have means to mitigate their risks through different employment their family could have. And I think these are major policy initiatives that have to be taken, not just by state government or the central government, but by everybody who is participating in this, whether it's an NGO, whether it's a large buyer or anything. They have to look at it not as today I'm helping them, but over the next 10 years, how do we revolutionize these people and get their lives in order? That's something that I seriously believe has to be done. And the amount of investment going in has to be focused on these areas so that it actually pays off in the long run. And it is not that it can only sell if there is subsidy this year or if NAFED buys this year or equivalent anywhere else. That is not a strategy which will work in the long run. We have to make those farmers self-sufficient at their own level by bringing them that ability to handle the market dynamics by themselves. So this is
perfect, man. So let me based on just what you just shared with us, I would like to understand a little bit more your perspective on, there is a lot of talk about FPOs. We call FPOs here. Rest of the world, they say that farmer community or community-based agriculture. There have been a very strong example, specifically in Europe, when you talk about Spain, where large corporation has been created where these farmers were able to contribute, and then they become hundreds and thousands of farmers being part of this as a stakeholders and doing agriculture. Do you feel the model which being followed in developing countries where the push with the idea of government deciding how to form those community, right? What that community should be doing. If they do A, then they are eligible to XYZ. If they are not doing this, then they are not eligible for XYZ. Do you see that the government guiding how these, I'll say that organic association of different farmers should happen? Do you think that's a right way forward, or do you see that it can be done in a little bit different way in developing countries at least?
I think, in India, we've been experimenting with this in different ways for the last 70 years, right? I mean, whichever way you look, the idea always has been, okay, how do we get the farmer to economies of scale? How to get them to, work together so that they can negotiate better or they can do something better. And everywhere it has sort of not worked because the farm size is pretty small, and therefore, the number of farmers in any of these groups becomes pretty large. And, it is very difficult to get 1,000 people to say yes to one thing against, 100 people to say yes to one thing. I'm not saying 100 is easy, but I'm saying 1,000 is way, way, way. It's not, 10 times more difficult. It's 100 times more difficult. So that has been one of our stumbling blocks, I think. The other is, of course, the politicization of the whole thing. The moment, cooperatives became a little powerful, everybody else wanted to get into it. They wanted to set up their own. So I'm not sure, even at point that I don't know how it will work. The third is the point that I was trying to make earlier also, which is the farmer and his family capable, or have they got the skills? Have they learned the skills during that time to be able to take on the market? That has again been a very, very big stumbling block in India, which is that the farmer, he does learn. I'm by no means saying that he doesn't learn. It's just that the learning probably has to be faster, because by the time he learns, the market has changed a little bit more. Or, the trader has learned a few more tricks, or he's introduced a few more things. And the farmer is always on the back foot. And therefore, that again, becomes a stumbling block. Now, if you take the FPOs that have been set up, everywhere that I have, interacted or checked what is happening, not enough of them have found a leader within themselves who can handle all these market dynamics issues. and if it is not a leader who comes from within and brought from outside, then you again run into the same set of problems that you did in a cooperative or anywhere else. Because that person who comes in may obviously be, completely motivated to help the farmers and do whatever. But at some point, if the farmers who are part of that FPO do not understand what he's trying to say or do, at some point he'll get frustrated or he'll, move beyond whatever is his mandate. And that is what actually ends up happening. But as it stands today, the FPO model, I don't know too many very, very successful FPOs. There have been, farmers have benefited from the FPO structure in negotiating for inputs. That I have no doubt about. But when it comes to selling their produce, I'm not sure how many of them have been able to, get into that next step of value addition, next step of, trying to figure out how to sell online or to be able to make big deals with, large retail outlets and stuff like that. I'm not sure it has happened, even though this is now, about 6 years old, the idea of the FPO and setting up and stuff like that. So we have a long way to go, but a lot of it depends on the farmer families being able to learn those skills and, move and be able to negotiate their way through the market.
Yeah, no, just touching base on just you said now about the excess on the part of selling the produce, right? The market linkages. Do you see even we are, especially in developing countries, there is a little bit of challenge in even policy making because they are always trying to remove the middleman, but they ended up creating a bigger middleman. So do you see that this whole, also that too much discussion about removing the middleman, because as you rightly mentioned that the farmer's understanding of creating more value addition is always limited, right? A farmer in say Telangana would not be knowing that what I should be doing to my cotton more so that Yara would be able to buy it from me. If he would have been those knowledge, then he would not be a small marginal farmer, right? He would have already grown up. So now when we talk too much of with the mindset of removing the middleman, do you think we get into the wrong policy formation itself rather than regulating and enabling and making it more transparent? We end up creating a monster out of the middleman?
I'm a great believer of market dynamics. You must have realized that in the last 15 minutes. So I would say that, when you look at any value chain, it is not possible for a poor middle income country anywhere in the world to have extraneous, unnecessary links in the value chain. So when people say the middleman is the problem, I would say the middleman, check what he does, and invariably you will find that he does add value. Even if it is one small trader who's just collecting from one village from 20 farmers and taking it to the next village where one guy is collecting from 20 villages and putting it together or whatever. Each one of them has some role to play, which is what the farmer sees value in and works with them. The point then becomes that how do we get it quicker to the retail, and how do we look at the share of the farmer in the retail price, which is where the problem comes. And that fragmentation of the margins, I think, has more to do with how we don't store it when the prices are lowest, and we tend to kind of the market dips when there is a harvest and it goes up later depending on whatever the availability is and so on and so forth. And if you look at most other developed countries, you'll see that the prices, especially of horticultural produce, does not vary dramatically over the year, right? And that is something where the government can look at investments. The problem is not the middleman as much as how do we spread our availability, how do we spread our logistics, supply chain initiatives that we take, which enables us to make everything available at reasonably the same price throughout the year. That is something that maybe because we have so many different geographical and meteorological zones that things become a little difficult. And also maybe because our consumption is located only in the bigger cities, as much as we may like to believe. It's probably more, I mean, Delhi and Bombay probably set the prices for horticultural commodities way more than any other place, in terms of how much they consume right there. So those kind of things we need to understand and figure out how, it can move, and then things will make a difference. So getting rid of a middleman is not going to happen. I mean, because he has a role to play in the supply chain. So if you look at, whether it's something like poultry, whether it is somebody like Big Bazaar, they don't want to talk to 100 farmers, right? So the trader who used to sell in the mandi is now selling to the Big Bazaar, because Big Bazaar wants to talk to only one guy. If he's not buying from Azadpur, he's buying from a guy who's collecting from different places. So the middleman will not get eliminated until we rationalize, how we produce, how we market, how our supply chain works.
Let me touch on some very critical aspect, right? And this is more centric towards India. If you compare, how we do our agriculture, we are as big, or I'll say that as diverse as a whole continent of Africa, right? Which is having more than 50 countries. We started with the right, I'll say that footnote by saying that make agriculture a state subject so that they can dynamically control the variables. But if you see over past 30, 35 years, we have started trying to more centralize the whole initiatives around agriculture. Do you see that centralization of agriculture policy making has been created a far more challenges than solution for Indian agriculture?
No, I actually see it as an evolution based on what has happened in the country. Maybe when I was a child, I don't think, there were tomatoes coming from Andhra Pradesh to Delhi, right? Similarly, there were periods in our lives when we didn't tomatoes at all. Just use the same example. And you lived with it. You said that, okay, between June end and September, there'll be no tomatoes. So everybody's life just moved on from there. But over time, all this has changed. You now got these hybrid varieties which can travel. You have the right, land requirements or the water requirements in different parts. They all grow to supply to different parts of the country. And therefore, automatically, it becomes a joint, venture of sorts between different states, right? And therefore, you have to figure out, okay, if it has to come from AP to Delhi, then the MP government cannot stop these trucks. The Maharashtra government cannot stop. So there has to be negotiations on those kinds also. And slowly, therefore, it becomes maybe automatic, maybe it becomes something that then the center sees as something that they need to, regulate so that it's the same throughout the country, or whichever way it works. But the point then becomes that agriculture, which was very local, has now become national and global. And therefore, the evolution of even the policy making has to come. But who does the investments and how it works, who is paying for those investments, then that challenge becomes a different, thing altogether.
Now, I would move a little bit on the commodity markets, which you have been expert in understanding, right? I would like to understand that we all know that the price which is being offered to the farmers, right? And the price which are actually, if you see in the commodity markets, there are few crops which we understand that actually, farmers are being paid far more than actually what the international commodity prices are. But at the same time, those commodities which can give higher value, right? They are not being actually grown by the farmers. Do you think that actually this policy fallacy has ensured that actually our farmers would always remain a sustainable farmer or sustenance farmer?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last bit.
Yeah, the fallacy of policy of saying, promoting see, I only procure wheat and rice. What do you expect farmer to grow, right? While I can get 20 dirham for 1 kg of okra, which I'm selling for 2 rupees here, right? To market, market in UAE, right? But still I won't take that risk because I understand that my risks are less because government has made or given me a window, right, which keeps me a sustenance-driven farmer.
Okay, here, I think we've got into a sort of a maze of our own making, While we've, opened up all other sectors, we've not opened up agriculture, and therefore the government still decides the import-export policy. So a lot of the crops that you're talking about where the farmer is not getting enough, if you look at it, they'll be somehow linked to, import of something or export of something, right? So if the global market is really low and you are allowing imports but not exports, and there's going to be a dynamic where the prices are not going to reflect what it should be, right? The other part is that because we keep clamping down on imports and exports based on some, knee-jerk reaction required based on some, price jump or fall that happened, there is no, we don't have a reputation of being a good partner in the export market, right? And therefore, our farmers cannot grow something for the export market. If we do not mess with our import-export policy for 10 years, I would say all these problems may well go away. A lot of it comes from the uncertainty from, the kind of policy jerks that happen. And, therefore, if a buyer has the ability to import, but the farmer has no way but to sell to this guy, that is, he can't do anything about
it. Fair enough. Now, actually, coming to your previous avatar, we have created part of creating one of the biggest employment generator in India, right? The Naukri.com, right? Which
I don't know.
So which I'll facilitated or enabled, right? Easy access to jobs, right? Do you see that actually, very few people want to talk about it, but we are far, as you rightly said, that underemployment in agriculture. The only way forward for developing countries is to get a lot of farmer out of the farming itself and get them something else. Do you think that policy needs to be worked on?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. If you really look at, I think when I was a child, we used to read about underemployment and, how much disguised unemployment exists. And I think it's not gone away. A part of it has, when manufacturing and services do really well, people do leave the farms and come and do other things. But when they don't, they have to go back because at least at home you get some food, right? And therefore they go back and do whatever. And of course, money from, NRIs and stuff has also sustained us for a long time. If you look at, states like Kerala and Punjab, I think a lot of it evolved around that, and a lot of the farming improvements and, the trade improvements or this thing happened through those kind of things. So, but definitely if a sector is very, very efficient, it cannot work the way it is working in India right now. And it's simply because we do not have enough opportunities for those people to move out and, be this thing. If you talk to a farmer in America, he is basically sitting on his computer and making deals and, making forward contracts and backwardation and everything he knows, and he's doing that. And how many more decades do you think it would take for at least 50% of our farmers to get there? Right now, I would estimate maybe 1% of our farmers are doing something like that. The others are not able to. So we have to get to that level where a single farmer is able to do and be able to provide all the others in his family, enough employment opportunities which are off land. And then be able to, so that the family also gets de-risked. Right now, the family is also completely dependent on the vagaries of whatever happens in the market and the weather, right? So I think employment generation, networking for the employment and finding people at the right place at the right time, all that is very important. But when it comes to Indian agriculture, we have way more to do than, just have a naukri.
No, in fact, I'll just give you one small, evidence where actually our policies, I believe, is is not judicially being made. I've been for 4 years being involved in agriculture field extensively, and before that, for more than 5 years in EdTech. And for past 1 year, I've been actually doing farming. And you'll be surprised, in my own state, I cannot buy a land as a farmer, because if I cannot buy a land as a farmer, I have to buy land which is non-agriculture, and on non-agriculture land, I cannot do farming. So end of the day, I'll have to either lease it, add my cost, but I cannot invest in agriculture. So that is what I believe needs to change. It was a real pleasure of interacting with you, ma'am, and I learned a lot. And thanks a lot for being on this platform and giving your insights. Thanks a lot. So now we move on to our next speaker, and again we are having a super experienced person, and we have Mr. Hemendra Mathur with us. Hemendra is a venture partner at Bharat Innovation Fund. He has over 24 years of experience in venture capital, private equity, management consulting, and investment banking in India, South Asia, Europe, and US. He has about 12 years of experience in early stage and growth capital investing. He's working as a venture partner with a deep tech sector agnostic fund. He has raised a private equity fund earlier and managed a portfolio of mid-sized companies in the food supply chain. So that's for the formal introduction. I would like to add, actually, if you would have been knowing at least 100 startups in India in agriculture sector doing well, Hemendra would be having definitely his hand or toe in that. I call him my guru because I have learned a lot from him for past 5 years, right? When I entered this sector with hardly much of understanding, with interactions, and his readiness and humbleness to share his knowledge has been a big value addition. And I've traveled a lot, I believe that, and Hemendra is having a huge role in that. Thanks a lot, Hemendra, for accepting our invitation, and floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Deepak. It's a pleasure and honor to be speaking at this forum. And I must correct, as much as you learned from me, I guess I have learned equally from you and other entrepreneurs in the ecosystem. All my learnings come from entrepreneurs. So I think it's a great relationship that I enjoy with you and other entrepreneurs. And I really fascinated the way the whole ecosystem has grown, find it very collaborative. And I think each one of us has a role to play. So it's a pleasure working with you, and I hope we continue this journey forever. So with that, I'll start. I have a 20-minute presentation. Is that okay if I share that?
Yes, yes, 100, please go ahead.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So I have about 20 odd minutes, so I'll try and finish it, and then I'll leave the floor open for questions and answers. The topic that I've chosen, which is very close to my heart, the opportunities in the agri-tech space for startups. And what I want to cover, essentially, just try to give you an idea how the whole landscape is evolving. What is it that we are trying to solve as startups in the ecosystem? What are the emerging themes that I see? Some of them have matured, some of them are evolving, some of them are at nascent stage. So I have listed, I think, 7 sort of themes out here, which I want to talk about. The role of ecosystem, and last but not the least, what I have learned from entrepreneurs and how it can be useful to some of you. I think this slide must be familiar to most of the guys who come from the industry, or what we are trying to solve as agri-tech founders and agri-tech ecosystem. There no dearth of problems in the agriculture value chain in India and globally, right from the pre-production stage to production to post-harvest. On pre-production, we see the biggest challenges, a high degree of fragmentation, which means that if I'm a startup, I am catering to a lot of farmers who have smaller land holdings, typically less than 2 hectares. That's what 85% of the Indian agriculture is. So any solution that I am developing, if I want to make it to scale, I have to address the challenges which a smallholder farmer faces. Another emerging challenge, which we cannot ignore anymore, is the climate risk. We probably one of the most water-stressed countries in the world. And we are seeing challenges because of erratic monsoon, or cropping cycles are getting shifted. We are seeing events like flooding and droughts more frequently. So clearly, I think agriculture is one of the most vulnerable sector because of the changes in climate, and we need to build solutions. And I feel very confident that this is a good time to look at solutions, because we have tech available which can predict it and which can solve for it. On the production side, I think one challenge that I see among various is that the labor is not available in Indian agricultural farms, when particularly at the time of peak requirement, whether it's sowing or harvest. So whether we like it or not, we need to start mechanizing our farms, and we need to build tools and devices which can cater to small farms. I think that is important. Of course, there is a role for robotics and computer vision, but at the same time, I think there's a role for mechanical tools which can do multitasking and which are affordable by smallholder farmers. So one of the biggest challenge and one of the most ignored areas is post-harvest. It's criminal to waste the kind of food, the quantum of food that we waste in India, when a significant part of our population is malnourished, right? So I think we need to build solutions for storage, for reducing post-harvest loss, for primary processing at the farm and near farm. So I think these are the supply chain challenges which most of the startups are trying to address. If you look at from farmers' perspective, essentially what we are solving for, farmers' access to inputs, credit. As we know, out of about 150 million farmers, only 50 million farmers have access to formal credit, and that's why a significant part of the population continue to depend on informal sources where the cost of capital is very high, ranging from 2% to 5%, 7% per month. So I think that need to be solved, and I believe that agri fintech is a very interesting opportunity waiting to be explored, and I see good number of startups starting to look at the intersection of agri-tech and fintech. And finally, of course, on the post-harvest solution, be it micro warehousing, be it primary processing, be it demand aggregation, we are seeing multiple such solutions, not just coming up, but also scaling to a decent size now. Last but not the least, data. I think data, is the most scarce commodity in the whole agricultural value chain. It gets lost, it gets filtered, it is not available on time, it is not accurate. So, of course, data can't solve for everything, but I would say in agriculture, data probably can solve for 90% of the problem that we are facing, which is significant. So I think there's a big army of entrepreneurs in this whole sector, which is working on data-centric solutions. So with that, let's move to the next slide. Where do we stand today? So I think this whole agri-tech momentum in India started about a decade back. Very few entrepreneurs, and even I was skeptical, to be honest, how these solutions will work, the farmers will adopt and all that. And I think 2010 to 2017, it was a slow start, a slow takeoff. Then I think 2017, 18, 19, we saw a number of entrepreneurs who entered into the sector, many of them without any agricultural knowledge or experience, but a lot of experience in the technology side. And that's what created an inflection point. They brought solutions which were not existing in the sector. They brought new thinking, new processes, a process orientation, which is lacking in the whole supply chain. It's essentially supply driven, how to make the supply chain more demand driven. So I think that is what caused a sudden spurt in the entrepreneurial activity. And of course, as it always happens, when you have good entrepreneurs, you have capital flowing. So we've seen investment to the extent of $1.5 billion in the agri-tech space over the last 10 years. It's still a drop in the ocean, given the amount of venture capital which is flowing into the country. But the good part is that almost 2/3 of this money, that's about $1 billion has come in last 36 months. So we are seeing suddenly it's a lot of investors who are interested to look at this sector. In COVID times, a lot of investors realize it's a resilient sector. Even if other other parts of the economy suffer, agriculture is something which is able to sustain its growth and momentum. And that's where there's a lot of defensibility, which is also very important from an investor perspective, who want to build a diversified portfolio of companies. And I'm very sure in time to come, it's my prediction, but I'm very confident that we'll get there. So my guess is in next 10 years, we should get at least $10 billion into the sector, and which means essentially $1 billion per year as a venture capital and private equity. So, and I'm sure we're going to probably surpass this number given the number of investors who keep on looking at this sector. Every month I come to know 1 or 2 investors who want to make their first deal into the sector. So I think that's all positive. Another challenge is farmer adoption. As per our study, about 10% of farmers have adopted some kind of agri-tech solution. Small number in the context of opportunity, but nonetheless very significant because the whole agri-tech ecosystem is nascent. And I'm very sure with the digital adoption improving, with access to broadband, with access to 4G, 5G, hopefully in time to come, we are going to see more and more digital adoption in the villages and rural areas, which can drive, because 90% of Indian agri-tech is digital, all said and done. So we are going to see a lot of these solutions scaling on the basis of farmer ability to access data and afford that data. Another important trend, which is also very encouraging, that a lot of Indian startups are looking at geographies outside India, especially data startups, because those solutions are geography agnostic. So whether if you're capturing crop signatures for, let's say, maize in Bihar, it's the same if you do that in Brazil or in Africa, right? So a lot of these solutions which are around data, be it crop signature detection, be it yield estimation, be it quality assaying, be it computer vision applications, I think those are global solutions. And I'm sure a lot of them will travel from India to other parts of the world. Likewise, we are finally seeing startups from other parts of the world looking at Indian market, which is a good news. There are many from, I would say, Southeast Asia, Australia, few from Europe, and a couple from US who are evaluating entry into Indian market. Another important element is increasing interest of corporates. Corporates play a very important role in taking solution to the farmers. They are I would say, one of the key intermediaries for a lot of startups, and that's where their engagement is critical. And we are seeing a bunch of corporates who have started to build startup engagement programs. I've listed some of them on this slide, like Nestle, Marico, Mahindra, ITC, UPL, Mexico, Olam, Buller, Godrej, Bayer. So almost every corporate is now aware of the solution which exists and trying to figure out how to pilot these solutions, how to build partnership with some of these startups. Last but not the least, government policy. I think Deepak was talking about it in his previous session. Also, it's continued to be very important. Fortunately, government recognized the role of agri-tech in driving farm income, in driving farm economics. And we are seeing multiple initiatives at the state government level, like Karnataka, Bihar, Odisha, West Bengal. Everyone is talking agri-tech. That's good news. Central government also is kind of helping facilitate scaling of some of these agri-tech solutions. So I think that's another important factor, and I'm sure that will play a very important role in time to come. Some key innovation themes, and I'll probably run through that in the interest of time. As I said, one of the key themes which has picked up in last few years, and I've given some examples like Agrostar, Dehat, Vighat, who are trying to build I would say farmer-centric supply chain, building farmers access to good quality inputs at the right time, at the right price. Inputs could be seed, fertilizer, machinery, and many other agriculture inputs which are being used in the farm. And also, some of the startups also started to sell some cattle nutrition products to the farmers. Some of the livestock startups are developing veterinary solutions which are available to farmers in his village or at his doorstep. So I think that model is catching up. Essentially, it includes elements like data and advisory. It is not a vanilla selling, it is prescriptive selling, where you capture a lot of data from the farm on the crop health, soil health, weather parameters, and build a prescription in terms of what kind of fertilizer need to be used, when you need to spray pesticides. And so I think there's a lot of intensive selling, I must say. And if these are digital models, not purely digital. Most of these startups have a call center. So farmers call and advice is being given on input application, and on the basis of that, we sell products and services. Very important element is also credit, because a lot of inputs get sold on credit. So a lot of these startups are trying to engage with NBFCs and banks who can provide those credit limits. And last but not the least, last mile delivery. I think that's still one of the challenging areas, because in rural areas, unlike what we see in cities, it's that ecosystem is not existent. We don't have delivery, we don't have a Rivigo, we don't have a black box. So I think last mile delivery solution is still something which needs to do a lot of catch up. Farm to fork solutions, one of the most visible agri-tech application, I must say, and one of the most, I would say, low-hanging fruit, if I can say so. And what these solutions are trying to do is build demand-driven, tech-enabled supply chain, supplying, procuring directly from farmers or intermediaries closer to the farmers, and then supplying it to buyers, which could include people like you and me, or Horeca, or mom and pop stores, or e-com, or modern trade, or institutional buyers. So I think that's where the value gets unlocked. You disintermediate the supply chain, you make it more data-driven, tech-enabled. So one is, some are focused on fruits, some are focused on fruits and vegetables, some are focused on staples. But what I'm seeing, which is a trend, that there are some specialized value chain which are emerging. A value chain, as we have seen for meat, poultry, likes of Licious and Fresh to Home and tender cuts. We are seeing many startups now are trying to do this play in the spices category, focusing on chili and turmeric. There are few which are focused on dry fruits, and there are even startups who are focused on silk, on jute, and hemp. And so I think we are seeing some bit of specialization happening. I think one challenge I find in this startup, that most of them are buying and selling. That's where the gross margins are kind of under pressure. And I believe the way to tackle it is, of course, one is to diversify your product portfolio, do more harvest buying, but very importantly is to build value addition in the supply chain. It could be sorting, grading, tracking, some primary processing at the farm, which can essentially also help you increase margin in addition to driving the scale. And of course, then we have a lot of solutions on the post-harvest side, essentially building solutions for warehousing, building a digital layer which can help warehouse receipt financing and things like that. Again, I've listed a bunch of startups here. Next is access to financing. As I said, agri-fintech still an nascent area, maybe about 15 to 20 startups, but very interesting solutions around farmer onboarding, farmer KYC. Again, these solutions are digital, likes of HESA and Frontier Markets and PAD, who have an army of people on the ground and which are trained to capture this data, but they go to the villages and they take the mobile phones or tablets to get this data. But I think those models are emerging, which can make it more efficient. Credit scoring, I think that's where I've seen a lot of interesting solution, which is essentially capturing data about farm, crop health, building risk assessment models, risk mitigation models, and risk monitoring models. I think that's kind of scaled up. A lot of banks have adopted these dashboards, which are being developed by startups using satellite imagery, drones, etc. The challenging part is loan recovery. I think that needs to be solved at scale. A lot of startups have tried going directly to farmers and recover. That's possible, but it takes time, and we still need to see some scalable solution. What I'm seeing is tripartite agreement between farmer, lender, and the buyer. And buyer could be a trader or a corporate or another agri-tech startup. So those agreements helps you recover the loan at scale without spending too much time and effort. And so I think solutions around that, of course, on the post-harvest side, again, a huge opportunity which exists, or warehouse receipt financing is still a very small fraction of the potential that exists in the market. Even financing for ancillary industries like poultry, like for dairy, for aqua, fisheries. I think to me, still a wide space from an innovation perspective. And I am sure in next maybe 2 to 5 years, we'll see very, very interesting solutions coming this way. Data and advisory, already talked about it. Capturing data from the farm. It could be about weather, it could be about soil. Very interestingly, a lot of farmers are willing to pay for data on soil nutrition, NPK, micronutrients. But unfortunately, that access is limited. They have to go to laboratories and get it done, which is fine. But how to make it more affordable, how to make it more efficient for the farmer, that's where we're seeing Vichitlekarn, Sensgrass, Norditech, who are developing in-field solutions for soil testing. And I think it can be game changer. I can tell you, if we start capturing the data at scale, our whole application of fertilizers and nutrients can change phenomenally. It can optimize farmer cost of inputs also. So I think data is becoming more and more critical. There's a startup called Plantix, which captures data about diseases and pest attack in real time. And they have more than 10 million downloads in India already. And farmer immediately sends the picture and he gets the advice. So I think this is what is, I think, is a game changer. If you can capture good quality data, if actionable data. Or there, of course, there's a question how you will monetize, and of course, that's one of the challenges. Whether subscription model would work or not, especially for smallholder farmers. But I think someone in the value chain is willing to pay. I think that is important. And if the farmer also see the farm economics playing out, I'm sure he or she will also pay. Mechanization, we spoke about it. As I said, there's huge amount of potential out there. Unfortunately, mechanization in India is confused with tractorization. We probably have more tractors than we needed, but we need tools which are affordable to farmers, which can pay back within 1 or 2 crop cycles. On the other hand, pay-per-use models for high-end equipments which are using, let's say, computer vision for spraying weedicide and pesticide, etc. We're going to see more drone application in pesticide application. We're already seeing some mechanical sprayers being used by some of the pesticide companies. And of course, mechanization solution on post-harvest side, be it cold chain, cold rooms, dehydration machines and dehydrators. So I think there's a huge opportunity out there. You need to figure out go-to-market. You need to, frankly, if you want to scale it up, you need to make it affordable for the farmers. Last but not the least, on the upstream side, novel farming solutions like vertical farming, like hydroponics, aquaponics, greenhouses. These is flavor of the season in the US, with likes of Plenty, Bowery, Harvest, raised tons of money. And, essentially it is smart use of how you control humidity, how you control airflow, how you control lighting, etc. So there's of course a lot of science behind it, but in India, it's still seeing, it's still, I would say, nascent stage because fortunately we have a large arable land area. So we have the option of doing conventional cultivation. There are a lot of countries where the arable land is small, like Singapore, for example. There's a lot of focus on these solutions. And likewise in Europe and US, I think these solutions are picking up. I think in India also there's an opportunity, but there's a higher capex which need to be sorted out, how to build the interesting business model which can optimize capex. And I guess this goes in line with the trend that we are seeing on direct to consumer. Because if you do agriculture in controlled condition, you can do a lot of quality control and build D2C models. So they go hand in hand. And that's how I come to the next point, which is it's essentially COVID triggered change. The whole D2C model, not just in food and agricultural domain, but in other industries also. 2 things have happened. One is consumer have become digitally more literate. Even geriatric population, young millennials, everyone is comfortable ordering products online. And secondly, I think supply chain has responded with adoption of technology. I think these are 2 primary drivers for D2C. And I'm very optimistic about it that some of these solutions are going to be there forever. In fact, they will scale. We're going to see a lot of D2C in fruits, in vegetables, in milk, in seafood, in meat, chicken, etc. And I listed some of the names out here like Big Basket, Milk Basket, Country Delight, Dishes. I think phenomenal opportunity which exists out there. And that relates to also branding opportunity because a lot of fruits, vegetables, staples continue to be commoditized products. The reason you can't brand it because you can't ensure a consistent quality across seasons and across geographies. But if you start developing solutions for quality control, traceability, food safety, I think branding becomes a huge opportunity. We already seen that in apples, in kiwi, likes of Jespri and Adani Farm Pick, Innoterra's Happy Bananas and Happy Cherries. And you will see that a lot of these models will see very interesting twists in time to come. And I'm very confident a lot of capital is going to flow into this. Alternative proteins still, I think world over, it's a meat substitution solution. In India, I don't think it's going to be meat substitution solution because of per capita animal protein consumption is anyway very low, right? So I think it's essentially an alternative protein solution, in terms of how do we extract protein from non-conventional products. So let's say a lot of animal protein comes from soya, for example. And look at the soya prices this year, 40 rupees to 80 rupees, and never seen before. Kind of impacted the economics of the whole poultry industry, which is so much soya dependent. So we need to look for solutions, whether it's for human consumption or for animal consumption. And I think almost all oil seeds have protein. It's our inability to extract protein in a more economic way. A lot of anti-nutritional factors need to be deactivated. So there's a lot of science into it. I'm sure we have an opportunity here to serve a protein demand. Given a highly protein deficient country, I think we should do about it. And also, if we want to develop a meat substitute solution, we can be global KPO or BPO for developing those solutions in India at a fraction of the cost. So like a burger which costs $5 in the US, a vegan burger, can we do it at $1 in India? I think that's where we'll see some interesting solutions coming from Indian market. Millet based products, one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite crops also. I think we lost out to this crop in Green Revolution because of. I think this crop is going to make a huge comeback. I think what we have seen in COVID, challenges arising out of diabetes and protein deficiency, etc. I think millet has the right product. Very low glycemic index. It can prevent type 2 diabetes. It also consumes very less water vis-a-vis, let's say, wheat or paddy. So I think it's environment friendly, good for your gut and stuff like that. So I already seen some good startups in this space, but I think we need more which can build millet-based products. Last but not the least, herbal products, organic products. It's been always a sunrise industry. Unfortunately, I think the one big challenge is lack of trust between the consumer and the producer. If I buy organic, is it really organic? And that's where, again, role of technology comes in terms of certification, in terms of traceability, in terms of quality controls. And I think we are at the cusp of that happening. And I think, again, when you think organic, you think premium. We need to make organic products affordable. I think that's where the volumes will come. So very quickly to the next section, which is on ecosystem, phenomenal ecosystem. Again, startups are there, the fulcrum, but the role which incubators have played, I think that's also phenomenal. I've listed some of them: CIICO, where I'm associated, AID and ARM, Will Grow, Pusakoshi, Venture Center, IndiGram, ICRISAT. These are, and this is not the entire universe, so forgive me if I'm missing some other names. But I think these guys have played a very important role in catalyzing innovation, in mentoring startups, in handholding them and taking to a stage where they can raise more money from outside. Acceleration programs from the government, from the private sector, corporate connects. I launched ThinkTag as a platform with 3 other founders, where we essentially build corporate startup partnerships. Very successful, supported by about 15 plus corporates now. Been very enriching experience taking these solutions to corporates and who in turn take it to farmers. Village ecosystem, this is one area, and I think again Deepak was talking about it in the last section. I think we need to create that. As he rightly said, we have more farmers than we needed. We need to get farmers out of farming and give them other opportunities to earn money. And that's where I see they becoming sort of conduits and bridges for agri-tech solution to reach out to farmers. So someone who can, let's say, do an aggregation of farm produce, someone who can manage a cold room, someone who can do primary processing, someone who can do, let's say, who can provide pollination as a service, someone who can fly drones. So I think at least 50 such alternative occupation can be created, wet services at the doors and stuff like that. So I think we need to channelize those models, which are lying in Bangalore or in Delhi or Mumbai. You could take it to Kalahandi, to Barabaki, to Alwar and places like that. And for that to happen, we need this ecosystem in the village. So it could be a progressive farmer, it could be an FPO, it could be village level entrepreneur. We need to start building that capacity so that they earn, let's say 10, 15, 20, 30,000 per month by becoming the last mile connect to the farmers. Digital platforms, important. I think there's a role for AgriStack. I've been talking it for ages, but I think fortunately it is seeing the light of the day. Government has launched this idea, open digital ecosystem for agriculture. It's been under discussion. I'm sure it will be implemented soon. It is conceived as a federated architecture where the data is going to be sourced from multiple points, and of course there'll be some governance, how this data can be stored, shared, and things like that. But it could be one of the most disruptive innovation that we want to see in Indian agriculture in time to come. The biggest challenge is the last mile access to farmers, right? For any bank to lend, let's say 30,000 rupees to farmer, it costs 3,000 rupees. How we bring that down to 30 rupees? And that's where the public data sets, which are readily available, will play a very, very important role. And that's where I see AgriStack being, playing a very critical role in building that connect. Investors, I already talked about. Again, some of the names, the incubators who've done a phenomenal job in building the ecosystem. This is the data from latest ThinkTech report in terms of funding. As I said, about $1.5 billion in last 10 years, almost 60% in last 3 years. We saw a small dip in 2020, largely because of COVID, but I'm sure this will bounce back. Already so many deals have been announced in the first 6 months. In fact, the first 6 months funding is already crossed $330 million. I'm sure this year will end around $700 to $800 million funding. Last slide. This is my learning from entrepreneurs. As I said at the beginning, correcting Deepak, that it's not the one I learn from entrepreneur. It's not that the entrepreneurs learn from me, but I do learn from them. And I think what really fascinates me about them is high degree of resilience. Extremely frugal in terms of how they manage their expenditure, how they control overheads. Many founders go without salaries for months. And the focus is on value addition. It's not about giving discounts like we see in urban internet or consumer internet solutions or fintech solutions. You genuinely create value to build scale and sustainable business model. I think that's very unique to agri-tech. Unit economics is important across industries, but very important in Indian food value chain because it's complicated. There are 10 intermediaries in between farmer and consumer. Everyone has to make money, right? So if I'm an agri-tech startup, I have to make money. I'm serving farmers, he has to make money. If I'm working with a corporate, they have to make money. If I'm working with a village level entrepreneur, he has to make money. So unit economics has to work at each and every leg from solution to scale. Another important point, personally for me, I like startups who are not obsessed with fundraising. It's important, but it's not not necessary that you. I like startups who spend 90% of the time building business, chasing customers, and maybe 10% in fundraising. If it's other way around, there are challenges. Team composition, another important factor. I see some bit of dichotomy because a lot of startups have good tech expertise, but little agriculture domain expertise. I would like to see that marriage happening between agri expertise and data science and stuff like that. In fact, we need to look at curriculum at our agriculture universities. We need to build more and more data sciences courses to improve their employability and to build very interesting models. I think agriculture is a heaven for data scientists because so many variables, so much modeling you can do. Another important thing is good mentor and investor selection right at the beginning. That definitely pays off. Last but not the least, a very, very farmer-centric approach. I love startups which spend like say 2 weeks in a month in villages. I really like that because they know the challenge, that they know what will work, what will not work. So I think that is very important. You have to be obsessed with the problem that farmers are facing and how do we solve that in a manner that that is efficient, that is affordable, and how do we scale the solution to multiple crops and regions. So that's where it is. So thanks very much for patient listening and really appreciate this opportunity. So I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot, Hemendra. Mesmerizing presentation. In fact, I totally lost the time. In fact, I just once you finish, I saw, I saw that. Okay. So I'm so sorry we won't be able to take questions because we are little bit miss the timeline. So and we
Right.
already have a next speaker all the way from UK. But
Sure.
Hemendra, one thing I would just like to mention, the passion and commitment you are putting in this ecosystem, believe me, that's infectious, right? And thanks a lot for doing it, because I'm pretty sure a lot of startup would not have even started if they would not have met you, right? So thanks for doing what you have been doing. Pleasure having you on this roundtable. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So now let's move to our next speaker, and we are having Dr. Benjamin Kwasi Addom. Dr. Benjamin is the advisor, agriculture and forestry trade policy at the Commonwealth Secretariat. He is an international expert in digitalization for agriculture, the intersection of digital innovations for agriculture, big data and analytics, innovation business development, and the enabling environment. He brings together expertise and experience from agriculture, agribusiness, value chain development, extensions, and digitization. Floor is yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir, loud and clear. Thank you.
Good. Yes, I joined in and I was listening to the previous presenter and I was taking note of some of the issues that were being mentioned. So, yeah, thank you, Deepak, for the opportunity to share what we are doing here at the Commonwealth Secretariat. I believe I have like 25 minutes, right?
Yes, you have got 25 minutes, sir. No
Okay,
issues.
okay. So I'm going to take some approach and hope it's not going to be controversial, but I hope people will understand. I'll do three things. First, I'll tell you about myself and the work I'm doing at the Commonwealth Secretariat. Then I'll try to talk about what smallholder digital agriculture of fisheries is. Because I tried to modify the title that was given to me a bit. So instead of, looking at it in general, I modified to be smallholder digital agriculture, which cut across not only Africa, but, the low and middle income countries across. So this is not specific to Africa, especially because of my work at the Commonwealth Secretariat. And then I'll talk about policy needs to strengthen smallholder digital agriculture. I think I have only two points over there. So it's not a traditional one listing all the policy needs. So hope I'll be able to work within the 25 minutes. Okay. So let me tell you about myself and what I'm doing at the Commonwealth Secretariat. So as I was already introduced, I don't need to spend time on this, but just to tell you that my expertise is in the area of agriculture and digitalization. I have training and experience combining agriculture, fisheries, as well as information science technology. So I'm not a typical IT guy, and I don't talk so much about technologies. I talk about solutions and services that reach smallholder farmers instead of focusing so much on high technologies that they don't seem to understand or is foreign to them. So that's me. At the Commonwealth Secretariat, I'm working on a program called the Commonwealth Connectivity Agenda for Trade and Investment. The agenda has 5 clusters. I'm working on what is referred to as supply side cluster, connectivity cluster. And the objective is to encourage participation of Commonwealth member countries in the value chain, agriculture and fisheries. We decided to separate ag from fisheries because we know some of the small island states, their economy depends on fisheries. So if you combine it, you swallow them. So we need to separate it and fit into their needs as well. These are some of the things that we are working on. I took this position just at the beginning of this year. So I'm now building my portfolio. So I heard a lot about data from the previous speaker. So we will be exploring the role of national government in building agriculture and fisheries data infrastructure. We will be focusing on capacity building across especially MSMEs, and we will be connecting with the farmers and the farmers associations, fisher folks, and all others. So these are the three stakeholder groups that we'll be working on. In actual fact, we are open for partnership across Asia, Caribbean, Pacific, Europe, and Africa. We work in all the 5 regions, and our channel of delivery is more about convening, equipping, developing tools and other things to support, and then advising member state governments and all those things. So the idea is, if we do this, then we can contribute to the overall goal of the connectivity agenda, which is about providing the enabling environment for agriculture, for trade, basically in general, across the Commonwealth. So this cluster is focusing on agriculture and fisheries. So that is the first part. The second part, I'm going to explain the approach we take to digital agriculture and digital fisheries. And I would like to get feedback from others. Even if we don't have time here today, please feel free to get in touch with me, and then we can talk about it, because this is something that we are working on to move forward within the next 3, 4, 5 years. So we're not going to do it alone. We need partners to do it. So as I said, we focus on agriculture and fisheries. So all that we are trying to do is to transform smallholder agriculture and artisanal fisheries. So if you agree with me, some of the things that I heard earlier from the previous speaker, these are key issues: building climate resilience for farmers, increasing yield, income not only for farmers, but also for other stakeholders, input dealers, financial institutions, and all entrepreneurs across the value chain, promoting access to finance, then the whole inclusion of women and youth. So this is at the smallholder farmer level that, all of us are trying to address, whether you are taking digital perspective or you are taking, some other perspective. We are trying to reach this goal. And once we do this, we say we are going to transform smallholder agriculture, and you at global level, macro level, you see inclusive agriculture as well as sustainable food and nutrition security, and fisheries at the same time. So I will not go through that. Then what I will do now is to tell you our approach to digital agriculture. So the idea is digitalization can then transform this, right? We can use digitalization. It's not a bulletproof, that's going to do everything, but can contribute to the transformation of all this that we are struggling to do. So we define, or we are framing digital agriculture or digital fisheries to consist of 4 pillars. And this is very generic, and we believe that you can apply it. If you work within the health sector, you can still apply these 4 pillars to the health sector. If you work within the educational sector, you can apply these 4 pillars. We are applying it within the agriculture and fisheries. So the first pillar is digital innovations, and that is what everybody talks about, right? The solutions and the services and the technologies. But we combine the solutions and services as well as the technologies we refer to it as digital innovations. So the smallholder farmer that I am talking about, they don't use drones, they don't use blockchains, they don't use Internet of Things, they don't use AI or machine learning. What they use is the advisory, the services that get to them, right? The solutions that they access on their, whether smartphones or their feature phone, whether SMS or USSD or IVR. These services are the ones that the smallholder farmer or the fisher folks is going to use. But myself and you, the entrepreneurs and others, we know that behind these solutions are these core technologies, right? So the farmer, if you mention blockchain to the farmer, it doesn't make sense. Machine learning, it doesn't make sense. So, but for me and you, we know that for these services to be relevant to the farmers, we need to use some of these technologies. So for me, anytime I'm talking about digital smallholder digital agriculture, I speak more at this level, where the farmer can understand access to market, finance, through services that they can easily use. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is the data part that I heard a lot about, which is something that, we talk about every day. There's so much data out there we're not willing to share. And that is why we are saying that, there's a problem with data, agricultural data. So data infrastructure, and this is one of the policy needs that I'll mention at the end. Data infrastructure is the second pillar of digital agriculture in our framing. And this is how we refer to it. It also has two components. You agree with me that for these services that we deliver to farmers, traders, extension officers, and others, you need content, right? You need agronomic data, weather data, soil data, market data, financial data for these solutions to reach farmers. At the same time, you need lots of information on the farmers, on the users, not only the farmers, but even the institutions, other stakeholders along the value chain, whether they are input dealers, they are financial institutions, banks, aggregators, and all others. If you have their identities, if you know where they are located, if you know, the kind of fertilizer they sell, the kind of chemicals that they produce, and the availability of this, then you can connect this to farmers. So the data infrastructure that we refer to here has these two components: data for content, and then data on the users, both the farmers, fisher folks, and other stakeholders on the value chain. And you agree with me that these technologies here are better used to capture this data, right? So you use drones and blockchains and satellites, sensors, Internet of Things connected to tractors and others to capture this data and then process it, relate it to the user identity, and be able to deliver customized, tailored, some refer to it as precision agriculture services to the farmers. But without this, you deliver generic messages to the farmers that are not relevant, and you have problem with digital agriculture. And this is what I refer to as digitization, not digitalization. So this component, the data part, is where we convert the data from analog to digital. Then the third component is the one that we normally don't talk about, which is the business part. Because, we have depended on the donors for a long time. They give us grants and subsidies and all kinds of things, or maybe the World Bank giving us loans. So we don't see it. And we don't think about sustainability of these initiatives. So we just get the grants, and, after 3-4 years, the project comes to an end. The services are no more useful to the farmer. The entrepreneurs may not be able to build, business models into it to be able to take it to market after that. And then the farmers go back to their normal position. Tomorrow, another one comes, World Bank comes, or Gates Foundation comes with another grant, we start again. So this is a big issue. For me, if you ask me what is the biggest problem with adoption of digital services at farmer level, I will not talk about infrastructure, connectivity, and all those things. I talk about this component, because if we actually build this, if we take good care of this component, we will have sustainable services, subsidized or even free for smallholder farmers to use. Then the fourth pillar is the enabling environment. And that is where, we talk about infrastructure, policies that needs to be in place, the capacity building for skills and literacy for the tools to be used, the business ecosystem to support the entrepreneurs, and all the knowledge and, products that need to be produced to support it. So when I talk about digital ag or digital fisheries, this is what I refer to. And most of the time, when people refer to digital agriculture, they focus on the solution and services. And I have done that in the past for the last, 6-7 years, promoting these solutions. And I have learned that you will have lots of good stories. You have lots of good results at, individual level, but to see impact at scale, you need to think of data, you need to think of business, you need to combine it with the enabling environment. And that's what we are missing. That's why we have, anecdotal stories here and there, but we still have criticism of the impact of digitalization on the agricultural or fisheries sector. So that is what I refer to as smallholder digital agriculture. So as I said, I have only 2 policy needs to mention here. So what are the policy needs? So 2 years ago, I was working, for this organization called CTA based in the Netherlands, an EU-based organization. So we worked together with Dalbeck advisors, and we produced this report on Africa, the digitalization of African agriculture on Africa, and lots of data. It took us almost a year to produce that report. You can search for it, even though CTA is no more there as an organization. The report is archived. You can look at it and see. In that report, we found that in Africa, digital agriculture is having some results. Okay, so as I said earlier, we see lots of good results individually on the ground. But if you tell me what is the impact of digital ag in Kenya, in Ghana, in Jamaica, it's difficult because the majority of the smallholder farmers still remain the same, despite all this investment that we are making. So I'm not saying that there's nothing good in this, because as you can see from these figures, digital advisory services is increasing productivity, income to farmers. That's a good, digital market advisory services, market linkages are increasing, financial services are increasing. And if you bundle this, you can see the huge, results, that they're having. We are having these cases, isolated cases here and there, but to be frank with you, we still have a long way to go to be able to see the results. So this is another slide from that report. So the report showed that in Africa, as of 2018-2019, over 33 million farmers, registered users, have been registered by over 300 to 400 digital solutions and services across the continent. Out of the 33 million, only about 11 million that we can say are unique users. And if you go into it, you will see that with over 200 million farmers projected in the continent of Africa around 2030, if this progress that we have now continues, then out of the 200 million, we estimate that about only 84 million will be unique users. And what do we mean by unique users? Even those are estimates. They are users that subscribe and remain using these solutions. So registered users are, just take their mobile phone number, as I said earlier about digital identity, take their mobile phone number, their location, and then you said you have, 200 million, reach, or 100,000 reach. Those are the data that solution providers have. So if you combine all that, you have huge number of reach, but those who are actually using it is very small. And this is the big gap that we need to fill to be able to see the impact of digital ag on smallholder farmers. And this is Africa. Let's go to India. Let's go to other parts of the world and see how this works. So there's a big, gap for us to fill when we want to see the impact, not just reach. If there are some donors on this call or international development partners, for them, they are looking for, data, statistics to fill their log frames. I work with, Commonwealth Secretariat, and we that's what you do, right? So you have your log frame and you need to meet that number. So you are not interested so much on some of this, you are interested in reach. to report how many farmers have been reached. And that is enough for you to continue getting your funding out. But it's not helping the smallholder farmer on the ground. So what are the policy needs? The first one is that we've been struggling to monitor and track the impact of digitalization on the sector. I was on one of these webinars recently organized by the World Bank, and one of the officials, I will not mention the name of the country, from Africa, was invited to give closing remarks. And the official said their country is the lead in digital agriculture in Africa. And I was listening, I said, what do you use to, make that kind of statement? And the next statement he made was that because the country has this number of digital solutions and platforms. And in my mind, you can't just use the number of solutions to assess the leadership of your country across the continent. You need to take into consideration all other factors, So for me, you need to look at digital innovations, the data, the state of data, the state of business development, and then the enabling environment. A number of indicators need to come together for you to say this country is the lead. So this is from the report that I mentioned. For example, in one country, you have so many platforms, but you are unable to see the result as expected. So we can't just use the number of solutions to determine, that this country is the lead. So one of the policy needs that I propose is for us development partners, researchers, and others to think of developing indices, digital agriculture or fisheries index at national level. For example, India, what are the indicators to measure the state of digital agriculture or digital fisheries in India? So you take digital innovation, you have a number of indicators that you can use to measure that. You take the data infrastructure, number of indicators. Once you combine these, you can say, this is the level of digital ag of India. And then you do the same in Jamaica or Vanuatu. You can now compare, or Sri Lanka. You can now compare and say, whilst India is performing more in terms of, the enabling environment, Vanuatu has more digital innovations, technologies, and services. By combining these indicators, this is the lead. So I think we need something like this to avoid, the miscommunication that we have, just using digital solutions to assess and to measure and say this country is leading or we are having impact. The second one is the absence of national government's leadership in smallholder digital agriculture. So the data infrastructure that I mentioned earlier, this is how I see it. If you go to a country, if you go to my country, Ghana, or Kenya, or Uganda, this is what you see. So if you have 50 digital platforms and solutions operating in my country, Ghana, each of the solution is building data infrastructure that I talk about, consisting of, the content data as well as the user data, right? That's what they are doing. So they put so much investment in, soil data, agronomic data, weather data, and all kinds of things. And you see the duplication that is taking place. And in almost all that, I don't have good examples of where national governments are playing a role in this. All these are in the hands of the private sector, which is good. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But you can see the duplication and the problem of not willing to share data. So everybody is building this data infrastructure. There's no hub. So I refer to it as spokes with no hub. So what the other policy needs that I think needs to be done is the role of national government. It doesn't mean that governments are going to start afresh and building data infrastructure. But if you go to my country, government should be able to coordinate what is already out there and have that generic hub that can contribute to future data development, so that if a new platform comes to Ghana, they're not going to start profiling farmers, registering farmers, because there's a national, identity platform database for farmers, and then that platform builds upon that, without investing so much in that. At the same time, that platform will contribute to this hub, whilst the hub, play that central role for others. So for me, I think we need something like that. We need national governments, this is policy needs. We need national governments to think and play some role in coordinating agricultural and fisheries data infrastructure, because everybody is crying about, data. And if we do this, if we have, if we're able to build this data infrastructure involving the private sector and sustain and maintain and keep it active, you can see the huge infrastructure. And this is what I refer to as, this is just, for example, Commonwealth, building data infrastructure in each of the 54 Commonwealth countries, and then connecting them, allowing these platforms to communicate and share data. You can see the huge data, the big data that can be built, which will inform supply chain, the flow of inputs and outputs from Asia to Africa to Caribbean, where there's excess, where there's lack. You have huge data infrastructure, but again, this has a lot of sensitivity in it, and it requires policy intervention for it to be done. So I will end it over there and say a big thank you for Deepak and the team for inviting me. And my contact, is available. Anybody who is interested is free to get in touch with me for us to have conversation on this. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Benjamin. It was a pleasure to understand various aspects of digitization. And as you rightly mentioned that, we cannot create silos of data, right? With every new tech company entering a market and then creating its own data set and replicating the efforts is not going to help, especially in the developing world, where actually the cost of digitization is very high. So thanks a lot. It was a pleasure having you. Unfortunately, we are having a paucity of time. Otherwise, I would have loved to ask a few questions to you, and we already have some questions from the users, but I'll share with you, and we would look forward to your response to that. A very interesting and insightful session. So thanks a lot.
Sure, thank you.
So everybody, this brings us to our last part of this roundtable, where we would be talking a little bit about our own perspective and the work we are doing in form of typically a briefing. Today, our briefing is about something which is very close to my heart. We have been hearing a lot of talks about Make in India, Digital India. I believe for a country like India, we should also start focusing on something which I proudly like to call Grow in India. Now, Grow in India is critical for a very simple reason that India, we all know, is predominantly an agrarian society. And we feel proud of saying that India is a country which can actually produce more than 80% of any type of food being consumed on earth. So let's understand how we can unlock the potential of Indian agriculture. So if you see that globally, we are looking at food and agriculture sector around $8 trillion US. Indian market size is close to $400 billion. But if you see that we are not even exporting the 10% of that. And this is where it's very critical, especially when we see that close to 1 billion people today, they are undernutrition. So when you have close to 850 million people before COVID and post-COVID, the number has gone to more than 1 billion people being hungry, not getting sufficient nutrition to live a healthy life. There is a possibility, there is opportunity for those countries which would be able to become the food ball of the world. We are already seeing that the number of people by 2050 would be nearly 2 billion more than what we have today. And this needs more food. And this food cannot be created with the resources which we are having currently. We're already seeing that reduction of agriculture productivity due to climate change. And especially if you see on the Western Africa and Southern Europe, we are already seeing the challenges of climate change impacting agriculture. So that means what? 30 to 40% of global population will be dependent on imports for their food security. And this is where India can play a very critical role, because the world will need 60% more food, and a third of that will come from India. Now let's understand how Indian agriculture has been. So we had ups and downs. So typically, like by 2011, we were growing at 8%. I'm talking about agriculture GDP. 2014 was pretty low, where we actually were growing in a negative territory. And again, we started seeing upward green shoots by 2016. But again, towards end of 2018, we came to the another bottom. But since 2018, we are again seeing an upward trend, and it is projected by 2026, Indian agriculture GDP would be growing at a very robust rate of close to 9%. Currently, we are around 4%. We all know that. Now, even if you see that share of agriculture in the GDP, again, in 1950s, we were 50% of our GDP was coming to from agriculture, which shrunk to close to 15.8% towards 2011. And again, we are seeing that there is upward trend. And by 2026, close to 18 to 19% of our GDP would be coming from agriculture and food sector. Now, why grow in India? For a very simple reason, India ranks first in the world with highest net cropped area. Land is scarce. We don't have too much of land to cultivate globally. Secondly, India is having a substantial part of wastelands which are currently not being cultivated, but with the modern technology of micro irrigation, better seeds, better nutrients, we would be able to substantially increase the cropped area further. And that's a very important point. Second, we are having highest number of farmers in the world. So we are having those capable hands who can till the field and create huge value out of those fields. Then we are having highest number of agroclimatical zone in one country. So as I was saying, that 80% of anything which world eat can be grown in India. We are having maximum number of commodity value chains. Close to 400 different value chains are already in India. So that creates a, I'll say, perfect recipe for India becoming the food ball of the world. Now, what can be done? First thing is that our yields are very low. Even on the global average, except 3 or 4 commodities, our yields are lower than the global average. And this is where we need to ensure that we use scientific farming methods to increase our yields in a holistic manner. And when I say in a holistic manner or with a holistic approach, we should not be just compromising the environment sustainability at the cost of yields. The abuse of water in rice and sugarcane need to stop. Otherwise, we won't have the water available to do any type of farming in some of the states. So here we need to have a holistic approach where, being environmentally sensitive, still we are able to increase our yield, and that is only possible by taking a scientific approach to agriculture. The correct crop selection is very critical, because then only you will be able to unlock the economic potential of farming. As in the previous session, we were talking about that by focusing on just 3 or 4 crops, which are lower in risk because of the government support, we cannot continue doing that for a very simple reason. We won't be able to be competitive in a global market in those crops. At the same time, we'll be losing an opportunity of generating far more revenues for our farmers by missing or not growing correct crops. We have to achieve efficiency by adoption of technology. Now, we had many speakers across this roundtable talking and emphasizing that we need to adopt technology. Now, those technologies can be in form of digital technologies. Those technologies can be in form of bioag. Those can be in form of the more evolved way of doing farming itself, whether it is regenerative agriculture with circular economy, or whether it is hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. Now, the idea is that we need to ensure that we do farming based on pure understanding of the geography, understanding of the markets, and understanding of ensuring efficiencies. And the last but not least, we need to plan scalable operation for better market access. No longer we can have in a small pockets different type of crop being grown to the level where we are not able to aggregate it properly. even when we are dealing with community farmers or the tribal farmers or the small and marginal farmers, we have to ensure that they work in collaboration with each other, so that from a specific village or a group of village, they are able to create sufficient volume, which can be aggregated, which can be processed, and which can be then made available through market access channels. So if we are able to do these 4 things, I believe strongly that we will be able to unlock potential of Indian agriculture. Now, horticulture and food, this is where we strongly believe is the biggest opportunity. Even as per the FAO and OECD Outlook 2020-29, the highest growth in agriculture will be in horticulture, which is around 25%. 99% of horticulture products are produced in developing countries and marginal farmers. So no longer you are competing with the existing giants which are dominating the cereal industry. Highest export growth in India was in horticulture product. Still, we are just 1% of the global market. Highest gross value addition growth in India is in horticulture product, still only 12.3% of the gross crop area. So while we see that there is a tremendous potential and growth in horticulture and food sector, unfortunately, we are still ignoring that sector. Still, our total crop area is very low in that. And that is creating a bottleneck where we are not able to make our farming profitable. So now understand what are the challenges related to horticulture. So first is that 30% post-harvest and 10% pre-harvest waste, mostly due to inefficient value chain and poor handling. So we need more infrastructure push to ensure we are able to reduce this criminal waste of resources. Because anything, especially post-harvest, which is wasted, that means already a lot of effort of the farmer, a lot of input, a lot of cost has already been gone in producing that specific commodity. And if it goes waste, it's a national loss. Annual price variations are up to 200% in most crop. However, periodic variations are 30%. But that is another challenge which farmers face, that they grow something and then there is a sudden crash in the price. We have seen farmers throwing tomatoes and potatoes, and from 2 rupees all the way to 70, 80 rupees, we have seen potato price going within a year. And these are the typically, I'll say that though aberrations, but yes, these are the big challenges faced by the farming community when they are doing horticulture crop. Then the toxicity, product non-consistency, poor packaging lead to rejection, especially in export. Now that is where we need to understand, we need to create capacity building, skill development, so that our farmers are able to understand these critical aspects which differentiate whether a product can be exported or can be rejected at the export level. And then finally, the fragility and perishability. Unlike cereal and all that, we have long shelf life and we are having time to find the right market and the right price. Unfortunately, in horticulture crops, you are having very limited time available to you to liquidate your harvest. Now, if you see that more the complex the value chain, higher the income. So I won't, because of paucity of time, go in each of that. But if you see that vegetable and fruit, there is a huge export market, especially microgreens, berries, spices, and tropical food. And many of these products, for example, turmeric or ginger or garlic, they are also having a lot of active ingredients which can be used in nutraceuticals. Another very interesting crop is moringa, where again, it is extensively used in nutraceuticals. And there are in India a lot of herbs and spices which can actually be also part of a nutraceutical industry, which itself is growing at a breakneck speed. So, but at the same time, that creates a complex value chain. And this is where I believe the digitization, better technology for preservation, and packaging would be very critical in case you want to unlock the potential provided by Indian agriculture. These are some tentative numbers. So like, for garlic, turmeric, aloe vera, ginger, moringa, pomegranate, blueberries, and gooseberries, the potentials are very high of earning per acre per year. Now, basically, as a company, HnyB, we are a very active player. We do a lot of support activities to farming. In fact, we also work very closely with a lot of farmers, both at the community and corporate level. We are having learning of hundreds of farmers, millions of hectares of land, worked in multiple countries, already working in 3 continents, very strong engagement with different agro ecosystem players, and with global CXOs of agriculture business. Now, how do we enable farming as a service? If you have patience to invest, passion for agriculture, we do have plan for you. We start with the business feasibility and creating a complete plan for you. The next stage, we create farm and crop plans for you. We provide agronomic support, do monitoring and intervention, help you in technology adoption, create market linkages with you. And once all of this is successful, then go for scaling. A little bit about me. I've been, as I said, I've been a farmer. I've been awarded by the World Economic Forum as a technology pioneer, worked extensively as a digital agriculture technocrat, but now involved both in the digital side by helping tech companies to get their market access to Africa and Asia. At the same time, also enabling Indian farming community to unlock their growth potential. With that, I would like to thank you, and thanks a lot for participating in this roundtable. We are very keen and look forward for your participation in our next roundtable, which is on 10th of August. That roundtable is about agriculture finance, where we will be delving deep into understanding what are the challenges of financing Indian agriculture at the grassroots level. With that, I thank all of you. Have a great evening. Goodbye.